Picture this. It's October 14th, 1066, and Harold Godwinson lies dead on Hastings Field, 3 Norman arrows piercing his royal standard. But this moment, captured in the Bayeux Tapestry's intricate threads, is just one scene in a 1,000-year drama that transformed Europe from Roman ruins into the foundations of our modern world. Archaeological evidence tells this story in remarkable detail. Sutton Hoo's ship burial reveals Anglo-Saxon kings draped in Byzantine silver. Carolingian manuscripts preserve Einhard's intimate portrait of Charlemagne. Viking hordes from York to Kiev trace trade networks spanning continents. Before we journey into this medieval world together, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? I'd love to know how this ancient story connects with you tonight. From 500 to 1500 CE, chroniclers like Bede and Gregory of Tours documented political upheavals, economic revolutions, and cultural transformations. We'll explore how agricultural innovations fed population explosions, how Gothic engineering defied gravity, and how university scholars preserved classical wisdom while creating new knowledge. Tonight, archaeological artifacts, contemporary chronicles, and modern scholarship combine to reveal medieval Europe's extraordinary complexity. As the last Roman eagle standards disappeared beyond the Rhine, as imperial purple gave way to barbarian gold, a new Europe was being born from the ashes of antiquity. The year 476 CE marks more than just political collapse. It signals the greatest transformation in European history since the Bronze Age. Archaeological layers across the continent tell this story in pottery shards and burial goods, in abandoned Roman villas and newly built Germanic halls. Cassiodorus, writing from Ravenna in the 530s, captured this moment perfectly. The old world passes away, he observed, yet from its foundations something unprecedented emerges. He was witnessing the birth of medieval Europe. In Ravenna, morning light streams through the windows of San Apollinare Nuovo, illuminating mosaics that tell an extraordinary story. Here, Christ stands flanked by Byzantine saints and Gothic kings. Theodoric the Great commissioned these works around 520 CE. They reveal how seamlessly Roman traditions merged with Germanic power. Theodoric's court preserved Roman law while embracing Gothic customs. His secretary Cassiodorus maintained the imperial chancellery, issuing documents in classical Latin. Yet archaeological evidence from Ravenna shows Germanic warrior graves filled with gold fibulae and silver belt buckles. The 1956 excavations near San Vitale revealed burial goods mixing Roman coins with Germanic amber beads. This fusion defined the early medieval world. The Ostrogothic palace complex covered 12 acres of Ravenna. Recent archaeological surveys using ground-penetrating radar reveal the scale of Theodoric's ambitions. Throne halls rivaled Constantinople's imperial chambers. Aqueducts carried fresh water from Alpine sources. Palace Bakery, uncovered in 1987, could feed 1,000 courtiers daily. This was no barbarian camp. This was a new kind of European kingdom. Meanwhile, in Toledo, the Visigoths created their own Romano-Germanic synthesis. King Leovigild's mint produced gold tremisses bearing both his Germanic name and Roman imperial symbols. The 1858 discovery of the Guarrazza treasure revealed Visigothic royal crowns combining Germanic cloisonné work with Byzantine pearls. These artifacts, now in Madrid's Archaeological Museum, demonstrate how barbarian kingdoms absorbed Roman craftsmanship, while maintaining distinct identities. The Visigothic Code, compiled under King Receswinth around 654, perfectly illustrates this cultural fusion. Roman legal principles governed property disputes. Germanic customs determined family law. Christian theology shaped criminal justice. Archaeological evidence from Toledo's churches shows how Visigothic builders adapted Roman architectural techniques to create uniquely Iberian sacred spaces. Across the Mediterranean, Vandal Africa presents another fascinating case study. When Genseric captured Carthage in 439, he inherited Rome's richest province. Recent underwater archaeology off Tunisia's coast has recovered Vandal merchant ships carrying African ivory and gold to Constantinople. These finds prove that barbarian kingdoms maintained sophisticated commercial networks. The Vandal royal palace at Carthage, partially excavated in the 1990s, reveals unexpected luxury. Mosaic floors depicted mythological scenes in styles matching the finest Roman work. Silver plate discovered in 2003 bears Vandal royal inscriptions alongside classical Roman motifs. Even Victor of Vita, a hostile Catholic chronicler, admitted that Vandal kings lived with Roman magnificence. The Burgundians in southeastern Gaul mastered perhaps the most delicate balance of all. King Gundobad's law code, the Lex Burgundionum, created separate legal systems for Romans and Burgundians within the same kingdom. Archaeological evidence from Lyon shows Roman urban life continuing uninterrupted under Burgundian rule. Pottery styles remain distinctly Roman. Building techniques show no break in tradition. Yet Burgundian grave goods tell a different story. The 1970 excavation of the Royal Cemetery at Geneva revealed warrior burials filled with Frankish weapons, Alemannic jewellery, and Roman silver vessels. These kings collected treasures from across Europe. They married daughters to Ostrogothic princes and Frankish nobles. Diplomacy became their greatest weapon. Christmas Day, 496 CE, changed European history forever. In Reims Cathedral, Bishop Remigius poured holy oil over Clovis the Franc's blonde head. "Bow thy head humbly, Sir Cambrian," the bishop intoned. "Worship what thou hast burned, burn what thou hast worshipped." 3,000 Frankish warriors followed their king into the baptismal waters that day. Gregory of Tours, writing a century later, understood this moment's significance. Clovis had done what no other barbarian king achieved. He united military conquest with Catholic orthodoxy. While Ostrogoths, Visigoths, and Vandals remained Arian heretics, the Franks became Rome's spiritual heirs. Archaeological evidence supports Gregory's account. The 1983 excavation of Tournai Cathedral revealed what appears to be Childeric's original burial. Clovis's father was interred around 480 with magnificent grave goods. A golden bull's head, Byzantine coins, and a crystal sphere speak to Frankish connections across Europe. But most significantly, Christian symbols appear alongside pagan Germanic motifs. The cultural transformation was already beginning. The Merovingian dynasty that followed creates one of history's great mysteries. These long-haired kings claim descent from a sea monster. They never cut their flowing locks, believing them to contain magical power. Merovingian royal seals discovered in 1867 near Paris show kings with hair reaching their shoulders, crowned but wielding distinctly Germanic battle axes. Fredegar's Chronicle describes the dynasty's peculiar power structure. Kings ruled through charisma rather than administration. They moved constantly between royal villas, dispensing justice from throne chairs carried on ox carts. The Salic law, compiled around 510, reveals their legal system's Germanic foundations. Virgiled monetary compensation for crimes replaced Roman punishment systems. Yet Merovingian kings maintained Roman fiscal structures. The polyptyches, or estate surveys, from Saint-Germain-des-Prés show how Roman tax collection continued under Frankish administration. Villa Rustica, the great agricultural estates, kept producing surplus grain for urban markets. Recent palynological studies of lake sediments confirm that agricultural intensification continued throughout the 6th century. Everything changed with Charles Martel. October 732 found him commanding Frankish heavy cavalry on the plains near Tours. Abdurrahman's Umayyad army had swept north from Spain, carrying the green banners of Islam toward the Loire Valley. For 7 days the armies faced each other. Then dawn broke on October 10th with a crash of mounted warriors meeting shield walls. The Liber Pontificalis records the battle's aftermath. Charles, whom men call Martel, the hammer shattered the enemies of Christ. Arab chronicles confirm the Frankish victory's decisiveness. Al-Tabari wrote that the cavalry of the Franks fought like a wall of ice, unmovable and terrible. This victory established Frankish supremacy throughout Western Europe. Charles distributed captured wealth among his followers, creating bonds of loyalty that would define feudalism. The Divisio Regnorum, discovered in the Vatican archives, shows how systematically Charles rewarded faithful warriors with land grants. Military service became tied to territorial holdings. Pepin the Short completed the transformation begun by his father Charles Martel. The Frankish mayor had wielded power while Merovingian kings sat powerlessly on their thrones, but Pepin wanted legitimacy, not just authority. In 751, he sent envoys to Pope Zachary with a carefully crafted question. Is it better for someone to be called king who has no power, or for someone who has the power to be called king? The papal response transformed European politics. Zachary declared that he who exercises royal power should also bear the royal name. Saint Boniface anointed Pepin at Soissons, applying biblical precedents to Germanic kingship. For the first time since Charlemagne, a barbarian king received divine sanction for overthrowing legitimate authority. The alliance between Franks and papacy reshaped Europe's political landscape. The donation of Pepin, confirmed by modern scholarship through analysis of papal letters, granted the Pope temporal authority over central Italy. This created the Papal States while establishing the principle that Christian kings served divine rather than merely secular authority. Across the English Channel, post-Roman Britain witnessed perhaps the most dramatic transformation of all. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle records that Hengist and Horsa landed in Kent in 449 CE, leading Germanic settlers into a province abandoned by Roman legions. Archaeological evidence paints a more complex picture. The Sutton Hoo ship burial, excavated between 1938 and 1939, revolutionized understanding of early Anglo-Saxon kingship. Beneath Mound 1 lay a 90-foot ship containing treasures rivaling any European royal burial. A golden helmet bore Swedish decorative motifs. Silver bowls came from Byzantium. Garnet cloisonné jewellery matched finds from Merovingian France. This was no primitive barbarian chief. The Sutton Hoo king, probably Raedwald of East Anglia, commanded international trade networks spanning the North Sea world. Chemical analysis of the silver vessels confirms their Byzantine origin. The garnets originated in Ceylon or India. Even the ship's wood came from Scandinavian forests. Early 7th century England was connected to a world economy reaching from Constantinople to Ceylon. 7 kingdoms emerged from this post-Roman landscape: Kent, Sussex, Wessex, Essex, East Anglia, Mercia and Northumbria. The Heptarchy dominated British politics for 3 centuries. Each maintained distinct identities while sharing common Germanic cultural foundations. The Tribal Hidage, a 7th century tax document preserved at the British Library, reveals how systematically these kingdoms assessed agricultural resources. Bede the Venerable, writing from Jarrow Monastery around 730, chronicled this world's Christian transformation. His ecclesiastical history provides our most detailed account of Augustine's mission to Canterbury in 597. Pope Gregory the Great had glimpsed blonde Anglo-Saxon slave boys in Rome's marketplace. "These are not Angles but angels," he reportedly declared, launching the mission that would convert Britain. King Ethelbert of Kent received Augustine in the open air, fearing Christian sorcery might work more powerfully within buildings. Yet Ethelbert's Kentish laws, the earliest English legislation written in the vernacular, show how quickly Anglo-Saxon rulers adapted Roman legal concepts. Compensation schedules replaced blood feuds. Royal protection extended over churches and clergy. The conversion proceeded kingdom by kingdom. King Edwin of Northumbria held a royal council in 627 to debate accepting Christianity. Bede preserves a councillor's famous speech: "The life of man is like a sparrow flying through the hall where you sit at feast in winter. It comes from the darkness and returns to darkness. If this new teaching can reveal what comes before and after, it deserves our attention." Canterbury Cathedral became England's spiritual centre, but archaeological evidence reveals Christianity's gradual penetration into Anglo-Saxon culture. The Staffordshire hoard, discovered in 2009, contained 3,500 pieces of gold and silver artefacts from the 7th century. Christian symbols appear alongside pagan Germanic motifs. A golden cross bears the inscription, "Rise up, Lord, may thy enemies be scattered." This was warrior Christianity, adapted to Germanic military values. Bede himself represents the synthesis of classical learning and Germanic culture that defined early medieval England. His monastery library at Jarrow contained works by Pliny, Josephus, and the Church Fathers. Yet Bede wrote in Old English as well as Latin. creating vernacular religious poetry that spoke directly to Germanic hearts. His account of Caedmon, the illiterate cowherd who received divine inspiration to sing Christian verses, perfectly captures how classical Christian culture took root in Anglo-Saxon England. In the cold Roman Basilica of St. Peter's, as Christmas bells echoed across the Seven Hills, Pope Leo III raised a golden crown above the head of a Frankish king, proclaiming him emperor. December 25, 800 CE, marked more than just another coronation. It announced the rebirth of the Western Roman Empire under Germanic leadership. The Liber Pontificalis records that Charlemagne appeared surprised by the ceremony, yet archaeological evidence from Aachen suggests he had planned this moment for years. The palace chapel there, completed just months before the Roman coronation, deliberately echoed Ravenna's imperial architecture. Charlemagne knew exactly what he was doing. He was recreating Rome itself in the forests of Germania. Einhard watched it all unfold from close quarters. As Charlemagne's secretary and biographer, he provides our most intimate portrait of the man who became Europe's first emperor in over 3 centuries. He was large and robust, Einhard wrote around 830, considerably exceeding normal height. His skull was round, his eyes very large and animated, his nose a little long. But Einhard reveals much more than physical appearance. He shows us a king who spoke fluent Latin and understood Greek, a ruler who collected books as eagerly as other monarchs gathered gold. Charlemagne kept wax tablets beside his bed to practice writing letters, though Einhard admits he began these efforts too late in life and made little progress. The Royal Frankish Annals chronicle Charlemagne's military campaigns with methodical precision. 33 Saxon campaigns between 772 and 804 finally brought Germanic paganism under Christian rule. The Capitulary De Partibus Saxoniae, issued around 785, reveals the systematic nature of this conquest. Death awaited anyone who destroyed churches, practiced cremation, or refused baptism. Archaeological evidence from Westphalia confirms the annals' accounts. The hill fort at Eresburg, destroyed by Charlemagne in 772, shows layers of deliberate demolition followed by Christian reconstruction. Saxon grave goods disappear from burial sites after 780, replaced by Christian symbols and Frankish weapons. This was cultural transformation enforced at sword point. The Lombard conquest proved easier but equally decisive. In 773, Charlemagne crossed the Alps with overwhelming force. King Desiderius surrendered Pavia after a year-long siege. The Frankish king took the unprecedented step of crowning himself King of the Lombards, rather than merely conquering their territory. Paul the Deacon, writing from Monte Cassino, understood the implications. The Lombard kingdom, which had lasted for 200 years, came to its end. Spanish campaigns proved more challenging. The Song of Roland immortalizes the 778 disaster at Roncesvalles, where Basque mountaineers annihilated Charlemagne's rearguard. Archaeological surveys of the pass reveal scattered Frankish weapons and armour fragments, confirming the battle's ferocity. Yet Charlemagne learned from failure. Later campaigns established the Spanish March, a buffer zone protecting Francia from Islamic raids. Aachen became the empire's beating heart. Construction began around 792, creating Europe's most ambitious architectural project since Ravenna. The palace complex covered 40 acres, rivaling Constantinople's Great Palace. Recent excavations have revealed the scale of Charlemagne's ambitions. The throne hall measured 150 feet in length. Hypocast systems provided central heating throughout the complex. The octagonal palace chapel still dominates Aachen's skyline. Bronze doors cast in Charlemagne's workshops bear his monogram Carolus. The upper gallery's marble columns came from Ravenna, stripped from Theodoric's buildings with papal permission. Charlemagne's marble throne, carved from a single block, sits precisely where he heard Mass daily at 9 a.m. Court life centred around the royal chapel. The Admonitio Generalis of 789 established daily schedules that governed the entire palace. Matins at dawn, prime at sunrise, Mass at the 3rd hour. Charlemagne presided over all major services, wearing a dalmatic that combined imperial purple with Frankish embroidery. Alcuin of York described the emperor as David, ruling a new chosen people. Einhard provides intimate glimpses of private life. Charlemagne dined simply, preferring roasted meat to elaborate sauces. He despised drunkenness, limiting himself to 3 cups of wine per meal. Summer brought hunting expeditions to the Ardennes. Winter evenings featured court readings from Augustine's City of God. The emperor maintained close relationships with his daughters, refusing to let them marry lest they leave his presence. Alcuin of York arrived at the Frankish court around 781, carrying treasures more valuable than Saxon gold. His library manuscripts, copied at the Cathedral School of York, preserved works by Bede, Cassiodorus and Isidore of Seville. Charlemagne immediately recognized their significance. He appointed Alcuin Magister, master of the palace school, tasking him with reviving classical learning throughout the empire. The palace school gathered intellectual luminaries from across Europe. Theodulf came from Visigothic Spain, bringing knowledge of Arabic scholarship. Paul the Deacon represented Lombard learning traditions. Angilbert, Charlemagne's son-in-law, connected the court to Frankish monastic scholarship. Together they created Europe's first international university. Curriculum followed classical patterns established by Cassiodorus. The trivium grammar, rhetoric, logic provided foundational training. The quadrivium arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, music offered advanced studies. Yet Carolingian scholars adapted ancient learning to contemporary needs. Alcuin's textbooks, preserved in over 200 medieval manuscripts, simplified Aristotelian logic for Germanic minds. The revolution began with script reform. Carolingian minuscule, developed at Tours under Alcuin's direction, transformed European literacy. Previous scripts varied wildly between regions and scriptoriums. Merovingian cursive had become almost unreadable. Visigothic script remained confined to Iberia. Insular script worked only for Celtic languages. Carolingian minuscule solved these problems through systematic standardization. Each letter followed precise proportional rules. Spacing between words became consistent. Capital letters marked sentence beginnings. The script read equally well in Latin, Greek, or vernacular languages. Alcuin's Tours scriptorium produced exemplars distributed throughout the empire. Manuscript production exploded across Carolingian territories. The monastery of Corbie produced over 400 books between 780 and 850. Saint Martin of Tours copied classical authors alongside patristic texts. Fulda specialized in Germanic vernacular works, preserving the Hildebrandslied and other heroic poetry. Modern paleographers estimate that over 8,000 Carolingian manuscripts survive in European libraries. Scriptoriums became preservation centers for classical knowledge. The St. Gall Library catalogue from 850 lists works by Virgil, Ovid, Cicero, Quintilian and Suetonius, alongside Christian texts. Monte Cassino preserved complete copies of Tacitus and Livy. Fleury maintained the largest collection of mathematical treatises outside Byzantium. Without Carolingian scribes, much of Latin literature would have perished forever. Court intellectual life flourished around theological debates that shaped medieval thought. The Libri Carolini, composed around 790, rejected Byzantine iconoclasm while establishing Western positions on religious art. The adoptionist controversy brought Spanish theologians to Aachen, where court scholars defended Orthodox Christology against Islamic influences. Alcuin's letters reveal intensive discussions about predestination, Trinitarian doctrine, and biblical interpretation. Knowledge organization became systematic under Carolingian patronage. Rabanus Maurus at Fulda compiled the De Universo, an encyclopedia organizing all knowledge according to allegorical principles. Walafrid Strabo created the Glossa Ordinaria, standard biblical commentary used throughout medieval Europe. These works established frameworks for understanding that lasted until the Renaissance. The Palace Academy's influence extended throughout the empire via reformed cathedral schools. The Capitulary of 789 mandated that every bishop establish schools for clerical training. Curricula followed palace school models. Teachers received training at Aachen before returning to their dioceses. By 850, literacy rates among clergy had increased dramatically throughout Carolingian territories. The capitulary system bound Charlemagne's diverse empire together through comprehensive legislation. Between 768 and 814, imperial scribes issued over 100 capitularies governing everything from monetary policy to monastery rules. The Capitulary of Herstal 777 standardized weights and measures throughout the empire. The Admonitio Generalis 789 established educational and moral standards for clergy and nobles alike. Legal unification proved challenging given the empire's ethnic diversity. Franks followed Salic law. Alamans used Alemannic customs. Lombards maintained their traditional codes. Rather than imposing uniformity, Carolingian administrators created parallel legal systems governed by personal rather than territorial law. The Capitulary of Mantua 781 explicitly acknowledged that each man should live according to his own law. The Missi Dominici system ensured central control over distant territories. Charlemagne appointed pairs of inspectors, one ecclesiastical, one secular to Tours assigned regions annually. The Capitulary of 802 defined their extensive powers, investigating judicial decisions, examining tax collection, ensuring military service, monitoring clerical behaviour. Archaeological evidence from Brittany shows Missi establishing royal residences to support their circuits. Local governance relied on appointed officials responsible to the emperor. Counts governed individual purgi, territorial units based on Roman civitates. Dukes commanded frontier regions requiring military leadership. Margraves defended border territories against hostile neighbours. All received benefices as land grants providing economic support in exchange for faithful service. The Marquis system proved particularly effective on dangerous frontiers. The Spanish March protected against Islamic raids. The Breton March contained Celtic resistance. The Bavarian Ostmark, later Austria, guarded against Avar attacks. Archaeological evidence from Regensburg shows systematic fortification construction under Margrave supervision. Economic foundations supported this administrative structure through agricultural surplus unprecedented since Roman times. The Polyptych of Saint-Germain-des-Prés, compiled around 820, reveals remarkable productivity on monastic estates. Three-field systems had increased grain yields by 50% over earlier techniques. Population growth provided labour for land clearance and urban development. Monetary reform facilitated trade throughout the empire. Charlemagne's silver denarius, minted to uniform weight and purity standards, became Europe's first international currency since Roman times. Finds of Carolingian coins from Denmark to Sicily demonstrate the economic unity achieved under imperial administration. The Capitulary on Coinage, 794, established minting privileges exclusively for royal workshops. Urban revival marked the empire's economic success. Aachen grew from a villa to a city of 20,000 residents. Regensburg became the Danube's major trading centre. Quentovich challenged Dorestad as the North Sea's premier port. Archaeological excavations reveal systematic street planning, public buildings and craft quarters in formerly rural locations. Through the North Sea mist they came, dragon-prowed ships cutting through grey waters, carrying warriors whose very name would echo in terror across Christian Europe. The Carolingian Empire had brought unprecedented unity to Western Europe, but from the northern seas emerged a force that would shatter that peace forever. These were the Vikings, the Sea Kings, whose raids and settlements would reshape the medieval world from Greenland to Constantinople. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle records the omen that preceded their coming. In this year terrible portents appeared over Northumbria and miserably frightened the inhabitants. There were exceptional flashes of lightning, and fiery dragons were seen flying in the air. The year was 793, and medieval Europe was about to meet its most formidable challengers. June 8, 793, dawned clear over the Northumbrian coast. Brother Higbald was copying manuscripts in Lindisfarne's scriptorium when lookouts spotted strange ships approaching through the morning mist. Long, sleek vessels with carved dragon heads rode low in the water. Their square sails bore unknown symbols. By noon, the holiest site in northern England was ablaze. Alcuin of York, safely distant at Charlemagne's court, captured the horror in a letter to King Ethelred. Never before has such terror appeared in Britain, as we have now suffered from a pagan race. The heathens poured out the blood of saints around the altar, and trampled on the bodies of saints in the temple of God, like dung in the streets. The Lindisfarne attack launched what historians call the Viking Age, but archaeological evidence reveals this was no spontaneous explosion of violence. Ship burials from Gokstad and Oseberg, excavated in the 1880s, show that Scandinavian shipbuilding had reached revolutionary heights by 800. The Gokstad ship, built around 890, measures 76 feet long, but draws only 3 feet of water. It could carry 30 warriors across open seas, then slide up rivers barely deep enough for fishing boats. Dendrochronological analysis of ship timbers reveals the technology behind Viking expansion. Oak planks were split, not sawn, following natural grain patterns for maximum flexibility. Iron rivets, rather than wooden pegs, allowed hulls to flex with wave action. Steering oars positioned on the starboard side enabled precise navigation in shallow waters. These weren't primitive barbaric vessels, they were engineering marvels superior to anything else afloat. The dragon head served psychological as well as decorative purposes. Adam of Bremen, writing around 1070, describes how Viking ships approached like sea monsters emerging from ocean depths. Carved serpent heads, painted in vivid reds and golds, terrorized coastal populations before the first warrior stepped ashore. Archaeological finds from York's Coppergate excavations show craftsmen producing these carvings with techniques borrowed from Celtic and Germanic artistic traditions. Character studies from the sagas reveal the men who commanded these dragon ships. Ragnar Lodbrok, Shaggy Breeches, supposedly earned his nickname from leather pants that protected him from serpents. Whether historical figure or legendary composite, Ragnar represents the archetypal Viking leader, poet-warrior, strategist, berserker, explorer-conqueror. The great army that devastated England from 865 to 878 claimed descent from Ragnar's sons, seeking vengeance for their father's death in King Aela's snake pit. Eric the Red exemplifies another Viking archetype, the exile who becomes explorer. Banished from Iceland around 982 for manslaughter, Eric sailed west into uncharted waters. The Greenland saga preserves his marketing genius naming the ice-covered island Greenland to attract settlers. Archaeological sites at Brattahlid and Gardar reveal substantial Norse settlements supporting 3,000 colonists at their peak. Viking military technology combined traditional Germanic weapons with innovative tactics adapted for seaborne warfare. The Repton battlefield excavations of 1980-86 uncovered a mass grave containing 264 Viking warriors who died fighting Mercians in 873-74. Weapon analysis reveals systematic equipment: iron spearheads, steel swords, round wooden shields reinforced with iron bosses. But bone evidence tells another story. 31% of the warriors showed healed fractures from previous battles. These were professional soldiers, not farmer raiders. The berserker phenomenon puzzled medieval chroniclers and continues to intrigue modern scholars. Saxo Grammaticus describes warriors who worked themselves up to such a fury that they howled like wild animals, bit their shields, and were as strong as bears or bulls. Archaeological evidence from Scandinavian bog deposits includes ritual deposits of weapons and animal pelts, suggesting shamanic traditions underlying berserker practices. Ship crews operated as mobile military corporations. The Roskilde ship finds, discovered in 1962, represent different vessel types serving specialized functions. Skuldelev 1 was a deep-sea cargo ship for long-distance trade. Skuldelev 2, a 98-foot warship, could carry 70 warriors. Skuldelev 5, a smaller patrol vessel specialized in coastal raiding. This naval diversity enabled Vikings to adapt tactics to specific targets and conditions. The great army that landed in East Anglia in 865 represented Viking warfare's evolution from raiding to conquest. Led by Ivar the Boneless and Halfdan, this force numbered perhaps 3,000 warriors, the largest military expedition yet launched from Scandinavia. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle records their systematic campaign. They took winter quarters in East Anglia, and there made peace with the inhabitants, and the East Anglians furnished them with horses, and they made peace with them. Alfred of Wessex faced this threat with innovations that transformed Anglo-Saxon military organisation. The Burghelheidage, compiled around 914, reveals his defensive strategy. 33 fortified towns or burhs created overlapping zones of protection. Each settlement was positioned within a day's march of its neighbours. Garrison requirements were calculated mathematically, 4 men per 5.5 yards of wall. Archaeological excavations at Wareham and Cricklade confirm these planned defences followed consistent engineering standards. The Treaty of Alfred and Guthrum, negotiated around 886, established the Danelaw boundary running from London to Chester. This agreement recognised Viking political control over eastern England while preserving Wessex independence. Coin evidence supports the treaty's effectiveness. Alfred's silver pennies circulate south and west of the boundary line. Viking-issued coins dominate eastern regions. 2 monetary systems coexisted within a single island, but the most dramatic Viking transformation occurred in Normandy. Charles the Simple faced constant Norse raids along the Seine Valley. In 911, he negotiated the Treaty of Saint-Clair-sur-Epte with Rollo, a Norwegian chieftain leading Seine Vikings. The Frankish king granted Rollo territories around Rouen in exchange for defence against other Viking attacks. Dudo of Saint-Quentin, writing around 1020, preserves legendary details of this agreement. Rollo supposedly refused to kiss Charles's foot in homage, declaring such submission beneath a warrior's dignity. His lieutenant performed the ceremony instead, grabbing the king's foot and lifting it so high that Charles fell backward. Whether accurate or not, the story captures Norman pride that would reshape European politics. Archaeological evidence from Rouen shows rapid cultural transformation under Norse leadership. Scandinavian-style buildings appear in the archaeological record around 920, but by 950 they're replaced by Frankish architectural patterns. Grave goods follow similar evolution. Early 10th century burials contain Thor's hammer pendants and Norse weapons. Later interments show Christian symbols and Carolingian-style artifacts. The Vikings were becoming Normans. The Rus expansion eastward created medieval Europe's most extensive trade network. The Primary Chronicle, compiled around 1113, records how Swedish Vikings established control over Slavic river routes. The tributaries of the Varangians drove them back beyond the sea and refused them further tribute and set out to govern themselves. But there was no law among them, and tribe rose against tribe. Rurik and his brother supposedly restored order, founding the dynasty that ruled Russia until 1598. Archaeological evidence confirms Scandinavian presence throughout the river systems, connecting the Baltic to the Black Sea. The Staraya Ladoga excavations, conducted from 1950-1970, revealed a major Viking trading centre by 750. Amber from the Baltic, silver from Central Asia, silk from Byzantium, and furs from Siberia passed through this northern entrepot. Dendrochronology dates the earliest Norse buildings to 753, making this Scandinavia's oldest permanent settlement outside the homeland. Iceland represented medieval Europe's most remarkable political experiment. The Landnámabók records that Norwegian chieftains began settling the island around 870, fleeing Harald Fairhair's royal unification. By 930, the growing population needed governmental structure. The solution was revolutionary: the Althing, a General Assembly meeting annually at Thingvellir. The Althing combined legislative, judicial and ceremonial functions without creating permanent royal authority. Gothar local chieftains presented cases for community judgment. Law speakers recited legal codes from memory, preserving oral traditions in the absence of written records. Archaeological surveys of Thingvellir reveal temporary shelters for thousands of participants, suggesting the Althing drew Iceland's entire free population. Leif Erikson's Vinland expedition, launched around 1000, achieved the medieval period's most distant exploration. The Vinland sagas preserve detailed accounts of encounters with Native Americans called Skraelings. Archaeological excavations at Lance aux Meadows, conducted from 1960-1968, confirmed Norse presence in Newfoundland. Carbon dating places the settlement around 1000 CE. Iron nails, a bronze pin and a spindle whorl prove Scandinavian occupation 5 centuries before Columbus. The conversion of Scandinavia marked one of medieval Europe's most dramatic religious transformations. Harald Bluetooth of Denmark led this revolution around 960, commemorating his decision with the Jelling runestone. King Harald commanded this monument made in memory of Gorm his father and in memory of Thera his mother, that Harald, who won for himself all of Denmark and Norway and made the Danes Christian. Archaeological excavations at Jelling reveal the monument's full significance. Beneath the larger of two burial mounds lay a double grave containing rich grave goods, silver cups, gold jewellery, carved wooden artefacts. But the bodies had been removed, probably for reburial in consecrated Christian ground. The runestone marked not just personal conversion, but dynastic transformation from paganism to Christianity. The process varied across Scandinavian kingdoms. Olaf Tryggvason's Norway experienced violent conversion campaigns beginning in 995. The Heimskringla preserves accounts of temple destruction and forced baptisms. Olaf Skotkonung's Sweden adopted Christianity more gradually, with pagan and Christian practices coexisting for generations. Archaeological evidence from Gamla Uppsala shows continued ritual deposits in sacred springs well into the 12th century. Runic stones throughout Scandinavia document this religious revolution. The Ramsund carving in Sudermanland depicts scenes from the Sigurd legend alongside Christian crosses. The Hunnestad monument combines Thor's hammer symbols with Latin inscriptions invoking Christ. These transitional artworks reveal how Scandinavian craftsmen gradually adapted traditional motifs to Christian themes. The saga tradition preserved pre-Christian Scandinavian culture while adapting to Christian literary conventions. Snorri Sturluson's Prose Edda, written around 1200, systematically recorded Norse mythology for Christian readers. His Heimskringla chronicled Norwegian kings from legendary origins to contemporary politics. These works transformed oral traditions into written literature, ensuring Scandinavian cultural survival within Christian Europe. Skaldic poetry reached extraordinary artistic heights during the conversion period. Egil Skallagrimson, active around 950, composed verses of startling complexity and emotional power. His Sonatarek, mourning his drowned son, ranks among medieval literature's greatest achievements. The poem combines traditional kenning techniques with Christian theological concepts, creating synthesis between pagan and Christian worldviews. Economic networks established during the Viking Age persisted long after political conversion. Silver hoards buried throughout Scandinavia contain coins from England, Germany, Byzantium, and the Islamic world. The Spillings hoard, discovered in 1999 on Gotland, contained 14,295 silver coins plus 486 silver objects weighing 67 kilograms total. Chemical analysis reveals silver sources from Central Asian mines, demonstrating trade connections spanning Eurasia. The Hanseatic League emerged from Viking trade networks to dominate northern European commerce. Bergen, established around 1070, became the western terminus for Scandinavian German trade. Novgorod served as the eastern anchor, connecting Baltic networks to Byzantine and Islamic markets. Archaeological evidence from Lübeck shows systematic German colonization of Slavic trading centers, but following patterns established by earlier Scandinavian merchants. By 1066, the Viking Age was ending where it began, with dramatic raids on England. Harald Hardrada's invasion represented the last great Viking expedition. His defeat at Stamford Bridge marked the close of an era. The Normans who conquered England 3 weeks later were Vikings transformed, carrying Scandinavian military traditions within French cultural forms. In castle courtyards across Europe, a ceremony ancient in spirit yet new in form was binding lord to vassal, creating the social foundation that would define medieval civilization. The Viking raids had shattered Carolingian unity. Royal armies could no longer protect distant frontiers. Local strongmen filled the vacuum, offering protection in exchange for service. From this chaos emerged feudalism, a system that would dominate European society for centuries. The ceremony itself carried profound meaning. A warrior knelt before his lord, placing his hands between the lord's palms. "I become your man," he declared, speaking words that created bonds stronger than blood. Archaeological evidence from sites like Château Gaillard reveals how these personal relationships literally shaped the medieval landscape. Every stone fortress, every fortified manor, every peasant village bore witness to feudalism's organising power. The morning mist still clung to the bailey walls when Sir Geoffrey de Montfort knelt before his lord, Count William of Poitiers. The year was 1094, and this ceremony of homage was being repeated across Europe as the feudal system reached its mature form. Geoffrey placed his hands between William's, speaking the ancient formula, "Sire, I become your man for the fief which I hold from you, and I will bear you faith for life and limb and earthly honour, against all who may live or die." Contemporary chronicles preserve detailed accounts of such ceremonies. Galbert of Bruges, describing homages performed for Count Charles the Good in 1127, emphasises their sacred character. First, they did homage in this fashion. The Count asked if he wished completely to become his man, and the other replied, "I so wish," and with his hands clasped and covered by the hands of the Count they were bound together by a kiss. The feudal contract created reciprocal obligations enforceable by custom and law. Lords provided protection and justice. Vassals rendered military service, typically 40 days annually, and counsel when requested. The Libri Feudorum, compiled in northern Italy around 1170, systematically recorded these obligations. Failure to perform service justified forfeiture of the fief. Refusal to provide protection released vassals from their oaths. Archaeological investigations at major castles reveal how these bonds operated practically. Excavations at Goodrich Castle show systematic expansion phases corresponding to documented homage ceremonies. The Inner Bailey, built around 1160, housed the lord's immediate household. The Middle Bailey, added around 1200, accommodated key vassals during military campaigns. The Outer Bailey, completed by 1250, provided space for the full feudal host. A knight's daily routine reflected his dual nature as warrior and landowner. Dawn brought attendance at Mass in the castle chapel. Morning hours were devoted to military training, sword practice, mounted combat, siege techniques. Midday meals in the Great Hall reinforced social hierarchies through elaborate seating arrangements. Afternoons involved estate management, legal proceedings, and diplomatic correspondence. Evenings featured entertainment, storytelling, and strategic planning. The Song of Roland, composed around 1100, provides insights into knightly values. Roland's refusal to sound his horn at Roncevaux demonstrates the paramount importance of honour. Death is preferable to calling for help. Loyalty to Charlemagne transcends personal survival. These literary ideals, while extreme, reflected real expectations governing knightly behaviour. The manor system provided feudalism's economic foundation. Each manor functioned as an integrated agricultural unit supporting the lord's household and military obligations. The Domesday Book, compiled in 1086, reveals systematic organisation across England. Manors averaged 200 acres supporting 200-300 inhabitants. Demesne lands, worked directly for the lord, comprised about 1/3 of each estate. The remainder was allocated to peasant holdings. Archaeological surveys of deserted medieval villages like Warham Percy reveal manor layout patterns. The Lord's Hall occupied the village centre, symbolising his authority. Peasant houses clustered nearby for protection and oversight. Churches provided spiritual guidance and social gathering points. Mills managed as lords' monopolies processed grain while generating rental income. The three-field system revolutionised European agriculture during this period. Earlier two-field systems left half the land fallow each year. The new rotation planted one field with winter wheat, another with spring barley or oats, while leaving the third field fallow. This increased productive capacity by 50% while maintaining soil fertility through nitrogen-fixing legumes. Palynological studies of lake sediments confirm this agricultural revolution's impact. Pollen analysis from sites across northern France shows dramatic increases in cereal cultivation beginning around 1000 CE. Oak and beech forests gave way to wheat and rye fields. Population supported by improved agriculture doubled between 1000 and 1200, creating labour surpluses that enabled castle construction and military campaigns. The Capitulars de Villis, though written under Charlemagne, continued influencing manor management throughout the feudal period. This document prescribed systematic organisation, separate accounting for demesne and peasant lands, seasonal work schedules, inventory procedures for livestock and equipment. Archaeological evidence from sites like Rougier in Provence shows continuity in estate management techniques, from Carolingian through high medieval periods. Village life centred around the manor court, where the lord dispensed justice and resolved disputes. Court rolls from Heilsauern beginning in 1270 preserve detailed records of these proceedings. Typical cases involved boundary disputes, marriage permissions, inheritance settlements, and theft accusations. Fines generated significant revenue while reinforcing social hierarchies. The lord's authority extended into the most intimate aspects of peasant life. The transformation of European warfare began with a simple innovation, the stirrup. Archaeological evidence suggests stirrups reached Europe from Central Asia around 700 CE, but their military implications developed gradually. By 1000, heavy cavalry dominated European battlefields. The Bayeux Tapestry depicts this revolution visually Norman knights charging with couched lances, their stirrups providing the stability necessary for effective shock combat. Castle architecture evolved to accommodate this military revolution. The earliest post-Carolingian fortifications were simple motte and bailey structures. The motte, an artificial mound, supported a wooden tower. The bailey, an enclosed courtyard, protected essential buildings and livestock. Archaeological excavations at Hen Domain in Wales reveal typical construction. A 30-foot motte built from 8,000 tons of earth and stone topped by a 40-foot timber tower. Stone replacement began in the 11th century as military technology advanced. The White Tower at London, begun around 1078, demonstrates Norman innovations. Walls 12 feet thick resisted contemporary siege equipment. Arrow loops provided defensive fire positions. Multiple stories separated living quarters from defensive installations. The Great Hall, measuring 90 by 40 feet, accommodated the entire feudal household during emergencies. Military service evolved into elaborate social ritual. The ceremony of dubbing, described in detail by chroniclers like John of Salisbury, transformed boys into knights through sacred and secular elements. Candidates spent night-long vigils in churches, praying before altars bearing their future weapons. Dawn brought ceremonial baths symbolizing spiritual purification. Lords girded swords while pronouncing obligations to protect the church, defend widows and orphans, and maintain justice. The chivalric code emerged from practical military needs but acquired idealistic overtones in literature and law. Geoffrey de Charny's Book of Chivalry, written around 1350, codifies expectations. Knights should prefer death to dishonour, protect non-combatants, keep oaths regardless of personal cost, and show courtesy to opponents. Archaeological evidence from battlefield excavations suggests these ideals influenced actual behaviour. Mass graves from Towton, 1461, show evidence of attempts to treat wounded enemies. Tournament culture transformed military training into spectacular entertainment. The earliest tournaments, described by chroniclers like Lambert of Ardres, were basically small wars fought for practice. Teams of knights battled across open countryside, taking prisoners for ransom and capturing horses and equipment. The Church initially condemned tournaments as occasions of sin and violence. Pope Innocent II banned them in 1130, declaring that knights killed in tournaments could not receive Christian burial. Despite papal opposition, tournaments flourished throughout the 12th century. Archaeological excavations at the lists at Kenilworth reveal systematic organisation. Spectator areas accommodated thousands of observers. Separate enclosures housed participants' equipment and servants. Elaborate pavilions provided accommodation for visiting nobles. These events became major social gatherings, bringing together nobles from across Europe. Women played crucial roles in tournament culture and feudal society generally. Eleanor of Aquitaine exemplifies female power within feudal structures. She inherited Aquitaine at 15, becoming Europe's most powerful heiress. Her first marriage to Louis VII of France ended in annulment, allowing her to marry Henry of Anjou, future Henry II of England. Her court at Poitiers became the centre of courtly culture, where troubadours developed ideals of courtly love. Female castle holders, or castellanes, exercise significant authority in their husband's absence. The Miracles of Saint Foy records Countess Ermengarde of Anjou defending her castle against episcopal attack around 1020. Archaeological evidence from sites like Château de Chinon shows modifications designed to accommodate female household management, expanded domestic quarters, separate chapels, and private gardens. Marriage negotiations reveal women's strategic importance in feudal politics. The Rituali Cartarum document Henry II's careful planning of his children's marriages. Eleanor's daughter Marie married Henry of Champagne, creating Anglo-French alliances. Her son Geoffrey married Constance of Brittany, securing that duchy's loyalty. These unions extended English influence across France through feudal bonds strengthened by kinship ties. The cult of courtly love, promoted in troubadour poetry and Arthurian romance, created idealized images of noble women. Chrétien de Troyes' romances, composed at Eleanor's court, established literary conventions that influenced European culture for centuries, yet actual marriage remained primarily economic and political. Archaeological analysis of noble graves shows that women often died young from childbearing complications, while their memorial inscriptions emphasize domestic rather than political achievements. Military religious orders combined knightly culture with monastic discipline. The Knights Templar, founded around 1120, created new models of Christian warriorhood. Their rule, attributed to Bernard of Clairvaux, prescribed detailed regulations: white mantles symbolizing purity, communal meals emphasizing brotherhood, daily prayer schedules maintaining spiritual discipline. Archaeological excavations at Templar preceptories reveal systematic organization reflecting both military and religious functions. Brother Benedict of Peterborough could hear the church bell calling peasants to work as he copied his chronicle by candlelight. Dawn was breaking over the manor of Cranfield in the year 1170, and across the fields, serfs were beginning another day of agricultural labour that would feed feudal society. Their lives, largely invisible to contemporary chroniclers, can be reconstructed through archaeological evidence, legal documents, and the rare surviving accounts that captured their experiences. Godwin the serf owned his lord nothing but service. His family had worked these fields since before the Norman conquest. The manor court rolls record his holdings: a half-virgate of 30 acres, a cottage with garden, common rights for 2 oxen and 12 sheep. In exchange, he owed 3 days' weekly labour on domain lands, additional service during harvest and planting seasons, and various payments in kind. Eggs at Easter, geese at Michaelmas, grain at Christmas. Archaeological excavations at Warren Percy reveal typical peasant living conditions. Houses measured 15 by 45 feet, accommodating entire families plus essential livestock during winter months. Walls were built from local stone bonded with clay mortar. Roofs used timber frames thatched with straw or reeds. Central hearths provided heating and cooking facilities, while smoke escaped through gaps in the thatch. Floor surfaces were packed earth, occasionally covered with rushes or straw. The agricultural calendar determined rural life's rhythm. March brought ploughing and sowing of spring crops, oats for horses, barley for brewing, legumes for soil fertility. June meant haymaking in meadows reserved for winter fodder. August through October dominated the farming year with grain harvest, requiring intensive labour from entire communities. November brought slaughter of livestock that couldn't be fed through winter, preserving meat in salt for the coming months. Village communities developed sophisticated systems for managing common resources. The extent of burnwood, compiled around 1185, documents how peasants regulated forest usage. Each household could collect deadfall for fuel, cut timber for repairs with manorial permission, and pasture pigs during pannage season. Archaeological evidence from sites like Havering shows that medieval forests were carefully managed landscapes rather than wild wilderness. Stripfield systems maximized agricultural efficiency while ensuring fair distribution of good and poor soils. Each peasant family held multiple strips scattered throughout the manor's arable land. Open field maps from Laxton, preserved since the 13th century, show this system's complexity. 3 great fields subdivided into hundreds of narrow strips, each identified by distinctive names: headlands, Mill Hill, cyclands. Crop rotations were community decisions binding all holders in each field. Technological innovations transformed agricultural productivity during this period. The heavy-wheeled plough, pulled by teams of oxen, enabled cultivation of dense clay soils previously unusable. Archaeological evidence from sites like Weststow shows these ploughs in use by 1100. Coulters cut through turf and roots. Mouldboards turned soil completely over, burying weeds and crop residues. This technology opened vast areas of northern Europe to intensive agriculture. Watermills revolutionized grain processing while creating new forms of economic control. The Domesday Book records over 500-600 mills in England alone. Lords monopolized milling, requiring peasants to process grain at manorial mills for substantial fees. Archaeological excavations at Tamworth reveal typical mill construction. Stone foundations supporting massive wooden gear systems, mill races channeling water flow, and storage facilities for processed grain. Windmill technology, arriving from the Mediterranean around 1180, extended mechanical power to areas lacking suitable water sources. The earliest documented English windmill operated at Weedley in Yorkshire by 1185. Archaeological investigations reveal these early mills were post mills, with entire mill houses rotating around central posts to face changing wind directions. This innovation spread rapidly across lowland England and the continental plain. Population growth created both opportunities and pressures within rural communities. Conservative estimates suggest European population doubled between 1000 and 1200, reaching perhaps 60 million by 1300. Archaeological evidence from cemetery excavations confirms this demographic expansion. Churchyards expanded repeatedly, often encroaching on previously secular land. New villages appeared throughout regions previously covered by forest. The expansion process, called a sarting, involves systematic forest clearance and agricultural colonization. Charters from the Abbey of Cluny document organized efforts to establish new settlements in the Massif Central. Monks provided initial direction and capital. Peasant families received hereditary tenure in exchange for clearing land and establishing farming communities. Archaeological surveys using aerial photography reveal hundreds of these planned villages throughout medieval Europe. Social mobility within peasant communities was limited but not impossible. Manorial court rolls from Halesowen record families accumulating landholdings across generations. Successful peasants purchased additional strips, acquired livestock, and sometimes gained administrative positions as reeves or bailiffs. Their children might receive education and enter the church. Archaeological evidence from peasant graves shows increasing wealth disparities by 1200, with some burials containing silver jewellery and imported pottery. Religious life provided peasants primary intellectual and cultural experiences. Parish churches, rebuilt in stone throughout the 11th and 12th centuries, dominated village landscapes. Archaeological excavations reveal systematic church expansion programs. Naves enlarged to accommodate growing populations, towers added for bells and defensive purposes, chancel areas expanded for increasingly elaborate liturgies. Wall paintings and carved decorations brought biblical stories to illiterate congregations. The agricultural revolution supported urban growth throughout this period. Surveys of medieval town sites reveal systematic foundation of new settlements near agricultural centres. Markets provided venues for exchanging surplus produce for manufactured goods. Archaeological evidence from sites like Norwich shows rapid urban expansion beginning around 1100. Planned street systems, specialised craft quarters, and substantial merchant houses reflecting agricultural prosperity's urban benefits. Across the European landscape, stone towers rose toward heaven, bells calling faithful to prayer, as the church became not just spiritual guide, but the very backbone of medieval civilization. The feudal system had created bonds of personal loyalty, but above these earthly ties stood spiritual authority that claimed dominion over souls themselves. From monastery scriptoriums to papal palaces, from village churches to cathedral schools, the church shaped medieval Europe more profoundly than any king or emperor. Archaeological surveys reveal the scale of this transformation. Between 1000 and 1300, Europeans built over 1,500 major churches and monasteries. Stone-cutting techniques advanced dramatically. Architectural innovations pushed engineering limits. The religious landscape of medieval Europe was literally being carved in stone, creating monuments that still dominate European skylines today. The sun had not yet risen over the Burgundian hills when the bell of Cluny Abbey rang for matins on September 11th, 910. Abbot Berno led his 12 monks into the darkened church, beginning a daily routine that would transform European monasticism forever. The Abbey's foundation charter, preserved in the Bibliothèque Nationale, granted unprecedented independence. Let the monks themselves elect their abbot according to the rule of Saint Benedict, without interference from ourselves, our heirs, or any earthly power, royal or pontifical. This freedom produced extraordinary results. Within a century, Cluny controlled over 1,000 dependent houses stretching from Scotland to Sicily. The Cluniac constitutions, compiled around 1080, standardized monastic observance across this vast network. Archaeological excavations at Cluny reveal the physical manifestation of this success. The Third Abbey Church, begun in 1088, measured 615 feet in length, larger than Old St. Peter's in Rome. Peter the Venerable, abbot from 1122 to 1156, left detailed records of Cluniac daily life. The Liber Tramitis describes hourly schedules governing 300 monks. Matins began at 2 a.m. with elaborate chanted psalms. Lauds followed at dawn. Prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, and compline structured the remaining daylight hours. Between services, monks copied manuscripts, managed estates, and performed manual labour as prescribed by St. Benedict's rule. But Cluniac's success bred criticism. Bernard of Clairvaux, writing around 1125, condemned monastic luxury. O vanity of vanities! The church is resplendent in her walls, beggarly in her poor. She clothes her stones in gold and leaves her sons naked. Bernard's Cistercian reform, centred at Citeaux Abbey, advocated return to primitive Benedictine simplicity. The Cistercian movement spread with revolutionary speed. From 12 founding fathers in 1098, the order grew to 742 houses by 1300. The Carta Caritatis, approved by Pope Calixtus II in 1119, created Europe's first international corporation. Annual general chapters at Citeaux ensured uniformity. Visiting abbots inspected daughter houses for compliance. This systematic organization enabled unprecedented expansion. Archaeological investigations at Cistercian sites revealed distinctive architectural characteristics. Churches avoided decorative sculpture, painted walls, and elaborate furnishings. Functionality governed design. The abbey at Fontenay, begun in 1139, exemplifies Cistercian principles: clean lines, natural lighting, harmonious proportions without ornamental distraction. Even today these spaces inspire contemplative stillness. Cistercian economic innovations transformed European agriculture. The Exordium Parvum describes how monks reclaimed marginal lands through systematic colonization. Granger's outlying farms managed by lay brothers pioneered new cultivation techniques. The Abbey of Les Dunes in Flanders drained coastal marshes, creating thousands of acres of fertile farmland. Archaeological surveys reveal sophisticated drainage systems and planned field layouts. Sheep farming became a Cistercian specialty with profound economic consequences. English houses like Fountains and Rivaux developed flocks numbering in the thousands. Wool exports to Flemish textile centres generated enormous profits. The pipe rolls of Henry X record Cistercian houses among England's wealthiest institutions. This success enabled magnificent building campaigns throughout the 12th and 13th centuries. The Horarium daily prayer schedule structured monastic existence around liturgical cycles. The monastic agreement of Winchester, compiled around 970, preserves detailed timetables. Winter schedules allocated 8 hours to sleep, 4 to meals and recreation, 12 to prayer and spiritual reading. Summer routines adjusted for longer daylight hours. Archaeological evidence from monastic sites reveals architectural adaptations supporting these schedules. Dormitories positioned for easy access to night offices, refectories designed for communal meals, scriptoriums oriented for optimal natural lighting. Scriptoriums became centres of intellectual production, rivaling any contemporary institution. The library catalogue from Christ Church, Canterbury, compiled around 1170, lists over 3,000 volumes more books than most kings possessed. Monastic scribes preserved classical literature while creating new theological and philosophical works. The Chronicle of Matthew Paris from St Albans demonstrates how monastery workshops combined historical writing, artistic illumination, and cartographic innovation. Illuminated manuscripts represent medieval monasticism's highest artistic achievement. The Lindisfarne Gospels, created around 720, required 6 years of intensive labour using pigments imported from across the known world. Chemical analysis reveals ultramarine from Afghanistan, vermilion from Spain, gold leaf from Byzantine sources. The Book of Kells, produced at Iona around 800, contains 2,000 decorated capitals using over 180 different pigments and dyes. Monastic workshops developed specialized techniques passing artistic knowledge across generations. The Theophilus Treatise, written around 1100, preserves detailed instructions for manuscript illumination, metalworking, and stained glass production. Archaeological excavations at monastery sites reveal sophisticated workshops equipped with furnaces, anvils, grinding stones, and storage facilities for raw materials. These were industrial centers serving spiritual purposes. Women's monasticism flourished alongside male communities, often achieving comparable intellectual and economic success. Hildegard of Bingen, abbess of Rupertsberg from 1150 to 1179, composed theological treatises, natural philosophy works, and musical compositions that survive in over 30 manuscript traditions. Her Civias, containing 35 mystical visions, ranks among the medieval period's greatest spiritual writings. The double monastery system, exemplified at Fontevraud, placed women's communities under female leadership while maintaining associated male houses for sacramental functions. Archaeological evidence from Fontevraud reveals extensive building campaigns directed by successive abbesses. The Abbey Church, completed around 1160, demonstrates architectural sophistication equaling contemporary male foundations. Cardinal Hildebrand ascended the papal throne as Gregory VII in 1073, carrying revolutionary ideas about church authority that would reshape medieval politics forever. His Dictatus Papae, discovered in the papal registers around 1075, proclaimed papal supremacy in stark terms. The Roman pontiff alone can with right be called universal. He alone can depose or reinstate bishops. He himself may be judged by no one. The Roman Church has never erred, nor will it err to all eternity. These were not merely theological claims, but political declarations of war against secular authority. The investiture controversy erupted when Gregory prohibited lay investiture of bishops and abbots. Kings across Europe had appointed church officials for centuries, treating ecclesiastical positions as feudal benefices. Gregory's reforms threatened to dismantle the entire structure of royal authority. Henry IV of Germany responded with characteristic imperial arrogance. The Synod of Worms in January 1076 declared Gregory not pope but false monk, ordering German bishops to withdraw obedience. Gregory's reply was devastating: excommunication and deposition. I release all Christian men from the allegiance which they have sworn or may swear to him, and I forbid anyone to serve him as king. The excommunication's political consequences proved immediate and catastrophic for Henry. Saxon nobles, already rebellious, found religious justification for revolt. Southern German princes declared Henry deposed unless he obtained papal absolution within a year. Archaeological evidence from sites like Goslar reveals hasty fortification work as Henry's authority crumbled throughout his territories. The drama at Canossa in January 1077 became medieval Europe's most memorable political theatre. Henry crossed the Alps in winter, reaching Matilda of Tuscany's castle where Gregory was staying. Contemporary accounts describe the emperor standing barefoot in snow for 3 days, wearing penitent's clothing, begging papal forgiveness. It was a pitiful sight, wrote Abbot Hugh of Cluny, which moved some to tears and filled others with wonder. Gregory's political triumph proved temporary, but the precedent established papal authority over secular rulers that would dominate medieval politics. The Concordat of Worms in 1122 provided compromise, But papal claims to universal jurisdiction continued expanding under Gregory's successors. Innocent III, Pope from 1198 to 1216, brought papal monarchy to its zenith. His Decretal Venerabilum proclaimed the Pope's right to examine imperial candidates for fitness. The Decretal Per Venerabilem asserted papal jurisdiction over all Christians in matters touching sin. Archaeological evidence from the Lateran Palace reveals extensive construction programs reflecting papal power's material dimensions. Innocent's political interventions spanned Europe. He deposed emperors, crowned kings, and placed entire kingdoms under interdict. England's John submitted to papal suzerainty after Innocent's interdict brought the kingdom to near revolt. Archaeological surveys of English churches show systematic suspension of religious services during the interdict. Altars stripped, bells silenced, mass vestments locked away. The Fourth Lateran Council of 1215 represents medieval papal authority at its most comprehensive. Over 1,200 church officials attended, making it the largest ecclesiastical assembly to that date. The council's 70 canons regulated Christian life from birth to death. Annual confession became mandatory. Transubstantiation received official definition. Marriage law gained systematic codification. Crusading obligations were extended. Canon law development created a parallel legal system governing medieval society. Gratian's Decretum, compiled around 1140, systematized centuries of papal decretals, conciliar canons, and patristic writings. This became the foundation for scholarly legal education at universities like Bologna and Paris. Archaeological evidence from cathedral schools reveals law libraries rivaling those of secular courts. Church courts exercised jurisdiction over vast areas of medieval life. Marriage disputes, inheritance cases involving clergy, oath-breaking, usury charges, and moral offences all fell under ecclesiastical authority. The records of the Canterbury Consistory Court, beginning in 1291, preserve thousands of cases demonstrating canon law's practical application. These courts offered alternatives to secular justice, often providing more sophisticated legal procedures. Excommunication and interdict served as powerful political weapons throughout this period. Excommunication severed individuals from Christian society, denying sacraments and Christian burial. Interdict suspended religious services across entire territories. The psychological impact on medieval populations, wholly dependent on church rituals for spiritual security, proved devastating. Archaeological evidence from sites under interdict reveals the practical consequences. Church doors were barred and sealed. Altars were stripped of ornaments and covered with black cloths. Bell towers stood silent. Cemetery excavations show that burials during interdict periods occurred in unconsecrated ground or were delayed until the prohibition lifted. The material culture of daily life was profoundly disrupted. The papal bureaucracy expanded dramatically to administer this growing authority. The papal chancery, documented through surviving registers beginning with Innocent III, processed thousands of letters annually. Specialized offices handled different types of business. The Camera managed finances, the penitentiary dealt with dispensations, the Rota served as Supreme Court for ecclesiastical appeals. Papal taxation systems developed to fund this expanding administration. Peter's Pence collected annual tribute from England, Poland, and Scandinavian kingdoms. Clerical taxation financed crusades and papal political operations. The Liber Censorium, compiled around 1192, systematically recorded papal revenues from across Europe. Archaeological evidence from papal palaces reveals construction programs funded by these expanding income sources. The pilgrimage road to Santiago de Compostela stretched 800 miles across northern Spain, marked by hostels, bridges, and churches built specifically for the millions of medieval travellers seeking St. James's blessing. The Codex Calixtinus, compiled around 1160, served as Europe's first travel guidebook, describing routes, local customs, and shrine treasures. Archaeological investigations along these routes reveal the pilgrimage's enormous scale. Bridges capable of handling thousands of travellers, hospitals with beds for hundreds of pilgrims, churches with enlarged naves to accommodate crowd worship. Canterbury's shrine to Thomas Becket attracted comparable numbers after the Archbishop's murder in 1120. The Canterbury Tales preserves literary evidence of pilgrimage culture, but archaeological excavations reveal material traces, pilgrim badges recovered from the Thames, roadside inns expanded to accommodate religious tourists, water conduits built to handle increased urban populations during festival seasons. Rome remained Christianity's ultimate destination, drawing pilgrims from across Europe to visit apostolic tombs and papal basilicas. The Mirabilia Urbis Romae, written around 1140, guided visitors through the city's sacred topography. Archaeological evidence from hostels near St. Peter's shows systematic expansion during the 12th century, with facilities capable of housing thousands of simultaneous visitors. Relic veneration reached extraordinary heights during this period, creating Europe's most valuable portable property. The Crown of Thorns, acquired by Louis IX around 1240, cost more than Sainte-Chapelle, the church built to house it. Chemical analysis of medieval reliquaries reveals sophisticated metalworking techniques and exotic materials, Byzantine gold, Arabian pearls, Indian gems. These objects represented Europe's highest artistic and financial investments. Miracle accounts, carefully recorded by monastic chroniclers, document popular religious enthusiasm while revealing medieval approaches to divine intervention. The Miracles of St. Foy at Conques, compiled around 1020, describes over 100 supernatural healings. Archaeological investigations of shrine sites show architectural modifications to accommodate miracle-seeking crowds. Enlarged crypts for relic display, separate entrances for pilgrims, specialized facilities for overnight vigils. Yet popular enthusiasm sometimes exceeded official church tolerance. The Albigensian Crusade, launched in 1208, demonstrated papal willingness to use military force against Christian dissent. The Cathars, or Pure Ones, practiced dualistic Christianity that challenged fundamental Catholic doctrines. Archaeological excavations at Montségur, the last Cathar stronghold, reveal evidence of the 1244 siege engines, defensive walls, and mass graves containing over 200 executed heretics. The Crusade's brutality shocked contemporary observers. Arnold Amalric's reported command at Béziers, "Kill them all, God will know his own," epitomizes the campaign's savagery. Archaeological surveys of southern French towns reveal systematic destruction during the 1209-1229 campaigns. Entire urban quarters were demolished. Churches were rebuilt to eliminate architectural features associated with Cathar worship. Dominican and Franciscan responses to heresy proved more effective than military campaigns. Dominic of Caleruega, encountering Cathars in Languedoc around 1205, recognized that heretical success stemmed partly from clerical ignorance and corruption. His order of preachers, confirmed by Innocent III in 1216, specialized in theological education and popular preaching. Archaeological evidence from Dominican convents reveals systematic libraries focused on theological and philosophical works. The Franciscan Revolution began with a young merchant's spiritual crisis in Assisi around 1205. Francis Bernardone, son of a wealthy cloth dealer, experienced conversion while praying before a painted crucifix in San Damiano Church. The cross preserved in Santa Chiara reportedly spoke to Francis, "Go, repair my house, which as you can see is falling into ruin." Francis interpreted this literally, selling his father's cloth to fund church repairs. Pietro Bernardone's fury at his son's behaviour erupted in public confrontation before Bishop Guido in 1206. Francis dramatically renounced his inheritance, stripping naked in the piazza and declaring, "Until now I have called Pietro Bernardone father, but now I say, Our Father who art in heaven." This theatrical gesture launched a religious movement that would transform medieval Christianity. Francis's testament, dictated before his death in 1226, reveals his revolutionary vision: absolute poverty, manual labour, service to lepers, rejection of money, and literal imitation of Christ. Archaeological excavations at the Portiuncula, the tiny chapel where Francis established his brotherhood, show the movement's humble origins. The first Franciscan shelters were simple huts of wood and thatch, contrasting sharply with contemporary monastic complexes. The Order of Friars Minor received papal approval from Innocent III around 1210, though no written rule survives from this early period. Francis's charismatic leadership attracted followers from across social classes. Jacques de Vitry, visiting Rome in 1216, described Franciscans as men and women, married and unmarried, clergy and laymen, united in apostolic poverty and popular preaching. Franciscan growth proved explosive and challenging. By Francis's death in 1226, the order included thousands of brothers scattered across Europe. The General Chapter of 1239 counted over 8,000 Franciscans in 34 provinces. This expansion necessitated institutional organization that conflicted with Francis's vision of absolute simplicity. Archaeological evidence from Franciscan convents shows architectural evolution from primitive shelters to substantial complexes rivaling traditional monastic foundations. The poverty controversy split the order after Francis's death. The spirituals maintained his original vision of absolute poverty, rejecting all property ownership. The conventuals, led by Brother Elias, advocated practical modifications enabling pastoral and intellectual work. Pope Gregory IX's Bull Quo Elongati in 1230 resolved the dispute by distinguishing between ownership and use, allowing Franciscans to benefit from property while maintaining technical poverty. University development transformed both Dominican and Franciscan orders during the 13th century. Dominican houses at Paris and Oxford became major centres of scholastic theology. Archaeological excavations reveal sophisticated libraries, lecture halls, and student accommodations. The order's emphasis on education produced scholars like Thomas Aquinas and Bonaventure, who dominated medieval intellectual life. Women's religious movements paralleled male developments while facing greater institutional restrictions. Clare of Assisi, inspired by Francis's example, established female Franciscan communities around 1212. The Poor Clares received papal recognition despite ecclesiastical reluctance about women's religious autonomy. Archaeological evidence from Clare's San Damiano convent reveals living conditions of extraordinary simplicity, with stone floors, minimal furnishings, and shared dormitories. Beguines represented medieval Europe's most innovative women's religious movement. These lay women lived communally while maintaining secular status, supporting themselves through textile work, healthcare, and religious instruction. Archaeological investigations of beguinages in Belgium and Germany reveal sophisticated urban planning. Residential quarters surrounding churches, workshops, hospitals, and schools integrated within single complexes. Over 200,000 women participated in this movement across Northern Europe. In a field outside Clermont, Pope Urban II raised his voice to assembled thousands, and his words, Deus vult, God wills it, would echo across centuries, sending armies marching toward Jerusalem. November 27, 1095, marked a watershed in medieval history. The Church triumphant would now export its spiritual authority beyond Europe's borders, launching holy wars that would reshape the Mediterranean world for 2 centuries. Archaeological excavations at Clermont reveal the council's impressive scale. The cathedral could accommodate perhaps 300 clergy, but Urban's sermon drew crowds requiring outdoor assembly. Earthworks discovered in 1960 show systematic preparation for thousands of attendees. This was medieval Europe's largest international gathering, bringing together nobles, clergy, and commoners in common cause against Islam. Urban II's sermon at Clermont launched the medieval world's most ambitious military expedition, but contemporary accounts vary dramatically in their details. Fulcher of Chartres, present at the council, records the Pope's appeal. A race from the kingdom of the Persians, an accursed race, a race utterly alienated from God, has invaded the lands of those Christians and has depopulated them by the sword, pillage, and fire. Robert the Monk, writing later, provides the famous Deus vult response that supposedly erupted from the crowd. The Pope's motivations combined religious fervour with political calculation. Byzantine Emperor Alexius I had requested military assistance against Seljuk Turks threatening Constantinople. Urban saw opportunity to heal the great schism between Eastern and Western churches while asserting papal leadership over secular rulers. The Gesta Francorum preserves Alexius's original plea. A pagan race has come out from Turkey and has invaded the land of Romania, Byzantium, and has depopulated it by killing and pillaging. Archaeological evidence from the Anatolian plateau confirms the context for Urban's appeal. Excavations at Nicaea reveal extensive Seljuk fortifications built after their 1071 victory over Byzantines at Manzikert. Turkish pottery and coins dominate archaeological layers after 1080, demonstrating successful occupation of formerly Christian territories. Urban's rhetoric, however extreme, reflected genuine Christian losses in Anatolia. The response exceeded all expectations. Guibert of Nogent estimated that 600,000 people took crusading vows, though modern historians suggest 100,000 actually departed for the east. Archaeological surveys along crusading routes reveal systematic preparation. Bridges reinforced to handle large armies, food supplies accumulated at strategic points, hospitals established for wounded and sick. This was medieval Europe's largest logistics operation. Character studies of crusading leaders reveal the complex motivations driving this expedition. Godfrey of Bouillon, Duke of Lower Lorraine, exemplified crusading piety. Contemporary chronicles describe him selling his ancestral castle to finance the expedition, declaring his intention to serve Christ rather than seek earthly glory. The Chronicle of Albert of Aachen preserves Godfrey's supposed declaration, "I go to serve God, not to seek a kingdom." Bohemond of Taranto represented different impulses. This Norman adventurer had spent years fighting Byzantines in southern Italy before joining the crusade. Anna Komnene, writing from Constantinople, provides a hostile but detailed portrait. He was a man of such heroic stature that he overtopped the tallest by nearly 1 cubit, narrow in the waist and loins, with broad shoulders and a deep chest. Bohemond's subsequent carving out of the Principality of Antioch suggests worldly ambitions matched his religious professions. The People's Crusade, led by Peter the Hermit, demonstrated popular enthusiasm's dark potential. Guibert of Nogent describes Peter's charismatic preaching. Whatever he said or did, it seemed like something holy because of his great reputation for holiness. Archaeological evidence from the Rhineland reveals the tragic consequences. Jewish cemetery excavations at Speyer, Worms and Mainz show mass grave sites from 1096, when crusading mobs massacred entire Jewish communities before departing for Jerusalem. The main crusading armies, led by nobles like Godfrey, Bohemond, Raymond of Toulouse, and Hugh of Vermandois, followed more disciplined paths through the Balkans. Archaeological investigations along the Via Egnatia reveal evidence of their passage, temporary camps, bridge repairs, and supply depots. The Byzantine chronicler Anna Komnene describes the emperor's careful management of these potentially dangerous guests. The siege of Antioch, lasting from October 1097 to June 1098, nearly destroyed the expedition. Archaeological excavations reveal Antioch's formidable defences, walls over 30 feet high, 400 towers, gates protected by multiple barriers. The Gesta Francorum records crushing hardships. So severe was the famine in the camp that many of our people died of starvation, and many sold their arms and fled secretly by night to the sea. Bohemond's betrayal of his oath to Byzantium emerged during Antioch's capture. Having sworn to restore conquered territories to imperial control, he instead claimed Antioch as his personal principality. Archaeological evidence from the citadel shows systematic Norman architectural modifications after 1098, transforming Byzantine defensive structures to accommodate Western military techniques. The siege of Jerusalem in June 1099 culminated the First Crusade with triumph and horror combined. Archaeological investigations of Jerusalem's medieval walls reveal evidence of the assault. The Gesta Francorum preserves eyewitness accounts of the final attack. Our men rejoiced and exulted and sang a new song to the Lord, for our hearts were filled with joy and gladness that we had come to the holy sepulchre of our Saviour Jesus. The massacre that followed shocked even medieval observers accustomed to warfare's brutalities. The anonymous Gesta Francorum records, "Men rode in blood up to their knees and bridle reins. Indeed, it was a just and splendid judgment of God that this place should be filled with the blood of the unbelievers, since it had suffered so long from their blasphemies. Archaeological evidence from the Temple Mount area shows destruction layers consistent with contemporary accounts, though distinguishing Crusader damage from later rebuilding remains challenging. The establishment of Crusader states transplanted European feudalism to the eastern Mediterranean. The Assizes of Jerusalem, compiled in the 13th century, preserved legal customs governing these territories. Archaeological surveys reveal systematic castle-building programs, Cracte Chevalier in Syria, Kerak in Jordan, Belvoir in Palestine. These fortifications combined European military architecture with adaptations to local climate and materials. The Islamic world's initial response to crusading conquest was fragmented and ineffective, but archaeological evidence and contemporary chronicles reveal how gradually unified leadership emerged to challenge Frankish occupation. Imad al-Din Zengi, Atabeg of Mosul from 1127, began the systematic conquest that would eventually expel the Crusaders entirely. Zengi's capture of Edessa in 1144 marked the first major Muslim victory over the Crusader states. The Chronicle of Michael the Syrian describes the city's fall. Zengi took Edessa and killed all the Franks who were in it. He destroyed the churches and monasteries. Archaeological excavations at Edessa reveal destruction layers from this period, with evidence of systematic demolition of Crusader fortifications and Latin churches. Zengi's son, Nur al-Din, continued his father's jihad with greater strategic vision. Based in Damascus from 1154, he unified Syria under single leadership for the first time since the Crusader invasions. The Damascus Chronicle of Ibn al-Qalanasi records Nur al-Din's systematic approach, combining military campaigns with propaganda, emphasizing religious obligation to recover Jerusalem. Epigraphic evidence from Damascus shows increased mosque construction and religious foundation activity during his reign. Archaeological investigations at Crusader sites reveal evidence of increasing Muslim pressure during the mid-12th century. Castle repairs become more frequent and extensive. Garrison sizes increase, evidenced by enlarged barracks and storage facilities. Coin hoards buried during this period suggest growing insecurity among Frankish populations. The tide was turning against Crusader occupation. Salah al-Din ibn Ayyub Saladin emerged as Nur al-Din's successor and Islam's greatest medieval hero. Born in Tikrit around 1137, he rose through military service to become Egypt's ruler by 1171. Contemporary biographical sources like Baha al-Din ibn Shaddad present intimate portraits of this remarkable leader. Archaeological evidence from Cairo shows extensive military preparations during Saladin's reign. Expanded arsenals, reinforced fortifications, enlarged harbours for naval operations. The Battle of Hattin on July 4, 1187, shattered Crusader military power through Saladin's tactical genius and Guy of Lusignan's strategic blunders. Archaeological surveys of the battlefield reveal evidence consistent with contemporary accounts. Muslim sources describe systematic destruction of the Crusader army. When the king was taken prisoner and the True Cross captured, their defeat was complete. Christian sources confirm the disaster's magnitude. So great was the slaughter that the springs and fountains in that region ran red with Christian blood. Saladin's recapture of Jerusalem on October 2, 1187, reversed nearly a century of Crusader rule with remarkably different character than the original conquest. Contemporary Muslim sources emphasize Saladin's mercy. He allowed the Franks to depart with their possessions and gave them safe conduct to their own lands. Archaeological evidence from Jerusalem shows careful preservation of Christian holy sites, contrasting sharply with earlier Crusader destruction of Muslim buildings. The Third Crusade, 1189–1192, brought together medieval Europe's greatest rulers in an attempt to reclaim Jerusalem. Archaeological excavations at Acre reveal evidence of the prolonged siege that began this expedition. Richard Lionheart of England, Philip Augustus of France, and Frederick Barbarossa of Germany led the largest crusading army since 1095. Contemporary chroniclers like Geoffrey of Vinsoff preserve detailed accounts of their campaigns. Richard and Saladin never met face to face, but their military confrontation created one of medieval history's most fascinating relationships. Contemporary sources from both sides record mutual respect despite religious enmity. Baha al-Din preserves Saladin's assessment. This king is very valiant, and since he came to these parts, the Muslims have not had a quiet day. Richard's chaplain records similar sentiments about Saladin. If he had not been superstitious in his faith, there would not have been a more excellent man in the world. The Treaty of Ramla in September 1192 ended the Third Crusade with compromise rather than decisive victory. Saladin retained Jerusalem while granting Christian pilgrims access rights. Crusaders kept coastal territories from Tyre to Jaffa. Archaeological evidence from both territories reveals rapid reconstruction efforts, harbour improvements, fortification repairs, commercial facilities expansion. Both sides recognized the need for coexistence. The Ayyubid dynasty established by Saladin continued governing Egypt and Syria until Mamluk usurpation in 1250. Archaeological investigations reveal systematic urban development during this period. Cairo expanded significantly, with new mosques, schools, and commercial facilities. Damascus experienced similar growth. These investments created economic prosperity that helped finance continued military pressure against remaining Crusader territories. Mamluk military organization proved decisive in the final elimination of Crusader presence. These slave soldiers, primarily recruited from Turkish and Circassian populations, developed superior cavalry tactics and siege techniques. Archaeological evidence from Mamluk arsenals in Cairo reveals sophisticated weapon production. Steel swords, composite bows, and siege engines superior to Crusader equipment. Baybars, Mamluk Sultan from 1260 to 1277, systematically conquered Crusader strongholds through combined military and diplomatic campaigns. His capture of Antioch in 1268 demonstrated Mamluk capabilities. The city fell after only 4 days' siege, with most inhabitants killed or enslaved. Archaeological surveys reveal systematic destruction of fortifications to prevent future reoccupation. The fall of Acre on May 18, 1291, ended 2 centuries of Crusader presence in the Levant. Contemporary sources describe the final assault's ferocity. The Templar of Tyre chronicles the last desperate defence. The Saracens entered the city from all sides and began killing everyone they found. Archaeological excavations reveal destruction layers consistent with these accounts: burned buildings, scattered weapons, hasty burial sites. The Crusades' most enduring impact lay not in territorial conquest, but in cultural and economic exchange that transformed both Eastern and Western civilizations. Archaeological evidence from Mediterranean ports reveals dramatically increased commercial activity beginning in the late 11th century. The Italian maritime republics Venice, Genoa, Pisa, and Amalfi established trading networks that would dominate Mediterranean commerce for centuries. Venice emerged as the Crusades' primary beneficiary through systematic exploitation of religious warfare for commercial advantage. The Venetian Chronicle of Andrea Dandolo records how Doge Enrico Dandolo negotiated the Fourth Crusade's diversion to Constantinople, enabling Venetian acquisition of Byzantine territories and trading privileges. Archaeological investigations in the Venetian quarter of Constantinople reveal extensive warehouse complexes and residential facilities built after 1204. The Fourth Crusade's sack of Constantinople in 1204 represented medieval Christianity's greatest scandal, while providing Western Europe with unprecedented access to Byzantine learning and art. Contemporary witnesses like Nicetas Choniates describe the devastation. They smashed the holy images and hurled the sacred relics of the martyrs into places I am ashamed to mention. Yet archaeological evidence shows systematic collection rather than random destruction. Valuable artworks, manuscripts, and religious artifacts were carefully selected for transport westward. Technological transfer accelerated through Crusader contact with Islamic civilization. Arabic numerals replacing cumbersome Roman notation revolutionized European mathematics and commerce. The introduction of the compass, astrolabe, and other navigational instruments enabled oceanic exploration. Medical knowledge, preserved in Arabic translations of Greek texts, transformed European healthcare. Archaeological evidence from hospital sites like Rhodes shows architectural adaptations incorporating Islamic medical techniques. The translation movement, centered in Spain and southern Italy, brought classical philosophy back to Western Europe through Arabic intermediaries. Gerard of Cremona, working in Toledo from 1167 to 1187, translated over 80 works including Ptolemy's Almagest, Aristotle's Physics, and Avicenna's Canon of Medicine. Archaeological investigations of the Toledo Translation Center reveal international scholarly communities, Arabic, Hebrew, and Latin manuscripts in the same workshops. Military orders emerged as the Crusades' most innovative institutional development. The Knights Templar, founded around 1119, combined monastic discipline with military expertise. Archaeological excavations at the Temple Mount in Jerusalem reveal their original headquarters. Underground chambers, training facilities, and religious spaces integrated within Muslim architectural frameworks adapted for Christian use. Templar economic activities transformed European banking. Their network of commanderies from Scotland to Cyprus enabled secure money transfers for pilgrims and merchants. The Temple Church in London, completed around 1185, demonstrates their architectural patronage combining Romanesque and Gothic elements with Eastern influences. Archaeological evidence from Templar sites reveals sophisticated financial record-keeping systems rivaling contemporary Italian banking houses. The Knights Hospitaller, originally founded to care for sick pilgrims, evolved into Europe's most powerful naval force. Archaeological investigations at Rhodes, their headquarters from 1310 to 1522, reveal extensive fortifications, hospitals, and harbour facilities. Their development of galley warfare techniques influenced Mediterranean naval tactics for centuries. Hospital archaeology shows medical innovations borrowed from Islamic practice. Surgical instruments, pharmaceutical preparations, and architectural features designed for patient care. Urban development accelerated throughout Mediterranean regions as Crusade-related commerce expanded existing cities and created new commercial centres. Archaeological surveys reveal systematic harbour improvements, deeper anchorages, expanded quays, and warehouse facilities. Pisa's arsenal, built to support Crusader fleets, demonstrates technological advancement in shipbuilding techniques, incorporating both Northern European and Mediterranean innovations. The Crusader castles themselves represent architectural synthesis between European and Middle Eastern traditions. Crac des Chevaliers, built by the Hospitallers between 1142 and 1271, combines French castle-building techniques with adaptations to local climate and siege warfare. Archaeological investigations reveal continuous modification incorporating Islamic defensive innovations, angled walls to deflect projectiles, multiple defensive lines, underground water systems. Intellectual exchange flowed both directions through Crusader contact. European scholars encountered preserved Greek philosophical and scientific texts in Arabic translation. Islamic scholars gained access to European theological and historical works. Archaeological evidence from libraries at Crusader sites reveals bilingual manuscript collections, Latin theological works alongside Arabic scientific treatises. The spice trade, revived through Crusader commercial activities, transformed European cuisine and medicine while generating enormous profits for Italian merchants. Archaeological investigations of medieval European kitchens reveal increased use of Eastern spices, pepper from India, cinnamon from Ceylon, cloves from Indonesia. These luxury goods, originally imported for medicinal purposes, gradually entered culinary practice among wealthy classes. Textile technology advanced through exposure to Islamic production techniques. Silk manufacturing, previously monopolized by Byzantine and Islamic producers, spread to Italian cities through knowledge acquired during Crusader period. Archaeological evidence from silk-producing centers like Lucca shows technological adaptations of Eastern techniques to European conditions. The famous Sicilian silk workshops combined Islamic patterns with European Christian imagery. Cultural synthesis appeared in art and architecture throughout Mediterranean regions touched by Crusader activity. The distinctive Crusader art combined Western European, Byzantine, and Islamic elements. manuscript illuminations showing Arabic calligraphy alongside Latin text, church architecture incorporating Islamic geometric patterns, metalwork combining Damascene inlay techniques with European iconography, archaeological finds from sites like Belmont Castle reveal this artistic fusion in everyday objects, pottery, jewellery and weapons showing multicultural influences. Where once Roman roads had connected empty countryside, now market bells rang from flourishing towns as Europe awakened from its rural slumber to embrace commerce, learning, and urban civilization. The Crusades had opened new trade routes and introduced exotic goods, but their most profound impact was transforming European society itself. Silver from Islamic merchants flowed into European markets. Eastern spices filled Western warehouses. Ideas crossed borders as readily as merchandise. Archaeological excavations across medieval Europe reveal this transformation's stunning scale. Urban populations doubled, then tripled. Stone buildings replaced wooden structures. Specialized craft quarters emerged around central marketplaces. The medieval city was being born, and with it, a new form of European civilization that would challenge the rural, feudal world that had dominated since Charlemagne. The merchant galleys of Venice cut through the morning mist of the Adriatic, their holds heavy with Byzantine silk, Arabic spices and Crusader gold. By 1200, the Venetian Republic had become medieval Europe's greatest commercial power, controlling trade routes that stretched from London to Constantinople. Archaeological investigations of the Venetian arsenal, begun in 1104, reveal Europe's most sophisticated industrial complex. Shipyards capable of building a war galley every day, rope walks stretching over 1,000 feet, foundries producing bronze cannons decades before their appearance elsewhere. The Doge's Palace, rebuilt throughout the 12th and 13th centuries, demonstrates Venice's unique political system. Unlike feudal monarchies elsewhere, Venice was governed by merchant oligarchs who elected their leader and made decisions through complex council systems. The Libro d'Oro, compiled around 1297, restricted political participation to established merchant families, creating Europe's first commercial aristocracy. Archaeological evidence from Venetian palazzi reveals remarkable uniformity in architectural style, suggesting shared values among the merchant class. Venetian commercial law, codified in the Capitulare Nauticum around 1255, established principles that would govern European commerce for centuries. Joint stock companies, marine insurance, and double-entry bookkeeping all developed in Venetian counting houses. Archaeological investigations of medieval Venetian warehouses reveal sophisticated storage and accounting systems. Sealed containers marked with merchant symbols, standardized weights and measures, and systematic inventory procedures. The Rialto market, mentioned in documents from 1097, became Europe's most important commercial centre. Archaeological excavations reveal systematic expansion. Wooden stalls replaced by permanent stone structures, specialized areas for different commodities, and regulated access for foreign merchants. The famous Rialto Bridge, built in stone after 1588, replaced earlier wooden bridges connecting the market to the city's governmental centre. Northern Europe witnessed comparable commercial revolution in the Flemish cloth towns. Ghent's population grew from perhaps 5,000 in 1100 to over 60,000 by 1300, making it larger than Paris. Archaeological investigations reveal systematic urban planning, canals for transporting raw materials, specialized neighborhoods for different crafts, and massive cloth halls for storing and selling finished products. The cloth hall at Ypres, begun around 1200, measured over 440 feet in length, larger than most contemporary cathedrals. Flemish textile production represented medieval Europe's first industrial revolution. Raw wool imported from England was processed through complex procedures requiring specialized skills and equipment. Archaeological evidence from Ghent reveals the process's sophistication. Fulling mills powered by redirected rivers, dyeing vats using imported materials from across the known world, and finishing workshops equipped with specialized tools for shearing and pressing cloth. The Guild of Weavers at Ghent, documented from 1218, established patterns of craft organization copied throughout Europe. Guild regulations controlled every aspect of production: apprenticeship terms, quality standards, working hours, and sales procedures. The Guild Hall, built around 1250, combined meeting spaces, storage facilities, and regulatory offices. Archaeological investigations reveal sophisticated systems for testing cloth quality and maintaining production standards. Labour conflicts in Flemish towns foreshadowed industrial disputes of later centuries. The Battle of Courtrai in 1302 saw Flemish craftsmen defeat French noble cavalry, demonstrating urban populations' growing political consciousness. Archaeological evidence from battlefield sites reveals the effectiveness of urban militia weapons, crossbows, pikes, and early firearms that would revolutionize medieval warfare. The Hanseatic League emerged around 1200 as Northern Europe's dominant commercial network. Beginning with German merchants trading in Baltic ports, it expanded to include over 200 cities from London to Novgorod. Archaeological investigations at Lübeck, the League's unofficial capital, reveal systematic urban planning designed for commerce, deep-water harbours, standardized warehouse designs, and residential quarters for foreign merchants. Hanseatic commercial law, codified in documents like the Lübeck Law around 1230, created uniform standards across Northern Europe. Archaeological evidence from Hanseatic settlements reveals remarkable consistency: standardized building techniques, uniform measurement systems, and identical accounting procedures. This standardization enabled merchants from Bergen to operate seamlessly in Novgorod or London. The Bergen Kontor, established around 1360, demonstrates Hanseatic organizational efficiency. Archaeological excavations reveal a self-contained German community within Norwegian territory. Residential buildings, warehouses, churches, and judicial facilities all organized around commercial activities. Wooden tablets preserved in Bergen's museum contain accounting records showing trade connections spanning the known world. Archaeological investigations at Novgorod reveal the Hanseatic League's easternmost extension. The German quarter, documented from 1192, contained permanent facilities for Western merchants trading in Russian furs, honey, and wax. Excavations have revealed over 1,000 birch-bark documents recording commercial transactions between German and Russian merchants, providing unprecedented insights into medieval commercial practices. Guild systems spread throughout European cities, transforming craft production and urban governance. The Guild Book of Paris, compiled around 1260, lists over 100 specialized crafts: bakers, brewers, carpenters, goldsmiths, furriers, and dozens of others. Each guild maintained monopolies over specific trades while providing social services, healthcare for members, support for widows and orphans, and religious activities centered around patron saints. Archaeological evidence from guild halls reveals their functions extended far beyond commercial regulation. The Guild Hall in London, begun around 1411, contained council chambers, courts for resolving trade disputes, and ceremonial spaces for religious observances. Guild records preserved in European archives document sophisticated systems of quality control, price regulation, and technical education that would influence European manufacturing until the Industrial Revolution. The Champagne fairs represented medieval Europe's most important commercial gatherings. 6 annual fairs rotated between Troyes, Provins, Lagny, and Bar-sur-Aube, creating year-round commercial activity. Archaeological investigations reveal systematic infrastructure development, permanent market buildings, regulated currency exchanges, and judicial facilities for resolving international disputes. Contemporary documents describe the fair's international character. Italian merchants brought silk, spices, and luxury goods from the East. Flemish traders carried cloth and manufactured items. English wool dealers supplied raw materials for continental textile production. German merchants provided metals, furs, and amber from northern regions. Archaeological evidence from fair sites reveals temporary structures capable of accommodating thousands of merchants and their goods. The fair letter, developed around 1200, became Europe's first negotiable instrument. Merchants could deposit money at one fair and withdraw equivalent value at another, eliminating the need to transport coins across dangerous routes. Archaeological investigations of fair sites reveal sophisticated banking facilities, secure storage areas, standardized scales and measures, and accounting systems that tracked complex international transactions. In a rented hall near the Church of San Domenico in Bologna, Irnerius began explaining Roman legal texts to eager students around 1088. He could not have known that his lectures would launch an educational revolution, transforming European intellectual life forever. The University of Bologna emerged spontaneously from student demand for legal education, creating the first institution of higher learning since the fall of Rome. Archaeological excavations in medieval Bologna reveal the university's rapid growth. Student lodging houses multiplied throughout the city centre. Specialized workshops produced parchment, ink, and writing materials. Bookshops clustered around the university district, copying and selling legal texts. The Archigymnasio, built in 1563, replaced earlier scattered facilities, but preserves evidence of medieval lecture arrangements, raised chairs for masters, benches for students, and walls lined with legal texts. The student university system at Bologna gave scholars unprecedented control over their education. Students hired masters, negotiated curricula, and established academic standards. The Authentica Habita, issued by Frederick Barbarossa in 1158, granted students legal privileges protecting them from local authorities. Archaeological evidence from student lodgings reveals international communities. Pottery from England, Germany, France, and Spain found in the same buildings. Civil law dominated Bologna's curriculum, focusing on Justinian's legal corpus rediscovered in late 11th century manuscripts. Glossators like Accursius created systematic commentaries explaining Roman legal principles for contemporary application. The Glossa Ordinaria, completed around 1250, became the standard legal textbook throughout Europe. Archaeological investigations of medieval law libraries reveal hundreds of manuscript copies, demonstrating the widespread demand for legal education. Canon law developed alongside civil law, with Gratian's Decretum providing systematic organization of church legal traditions around 1140. Archaeological evidence from Bologna's cathedral precinct reveals specialized schools for canonical studies, lecture halls, libraries containing theological and legal manuscripts, and residential facilities for clerical students. The university's dual focus on secular and ecclesiastical law created lawyers capable of serving both church and state. Paris emerged as Europe's theological centre through different evolutionary processes. The Cathedral School of Notre Dame, documented from the early 12th century, attracted scholars seeking advanced theological education. Peter Abelard's controversial teachings around 1115 demonstrated both the intellectual excitement and institutional tensions characterizing early university development. Archaeological investigations around Notre Dame reveal student quarters, bookshops, and lecture halls scattered throughout the left bank. The University of Paris received papal recognition from Innocent III around 1200, formalizing institutional structures that had developed organically over the previous century. The university's four faculties arts, theology, canon law, and medicine established patterns copied throughout Europe. Archaeological evidence from the Latin Quarter reveals systematic urban planning designed to accommodate academic activities, residential colleges, specialized libraries, and regulated markets for academic supplies. Student life in medieval Paris combined intellectual excitement with considerable hardship. Contemporary accounts describe overcrowded lodgings, irregular food supplies, and frequent conflicts with local authorities. The Chronicle of Saint-Denis records student riots in 1229 that temporarily closed the university. Archaeological evidence from student quarters reveals living conditions, shared dormitories, communal meals, and minimal personal possessions beyond books and writing materials. The disputation system developed at Paris influenced European intellectual methods for centuries. Masters and students engaged in formal debates following Aristotelian logical procedures. Quodlibetal questions, disputations on any topic raised by the audience, demonstrated scholarly expertise while advancing knowledge through systematic argumentation. Archaeological investigations of lecture halls reveal architectural adaptations supporting these activities. Raised platforms for disputants, seating arrangements for audiences, and acoustic features enhancing oral delivery. Oxford University emerged around 1167 following English royal conflicts with Paris authorities. Henry II's prohibition on English students attending Paris led to systematic development of Oxford schools. Archaeological investigations reveal rapid institutional growth. Student halls multiplied throughout the town, specialized buildings appeared for different academic disciplines, and the university developed distinctive collegiate organization. Cambridge University, founded around 1209 by Oxford masters fleeing town-gown violence, established England's second major centre of learning. Archaeological evidence from both universities reveals similar developmental patterns: organic growth around existing religious institutions, systematic expansion as student populations increased, and eventual formal recognition by royal and papal authorities. The collegiate system, particularly developed at Oxford and Cambridge, created unique residential arrangements combining education with communal living. Archaeological investigations of early colleges reveal architectural innovations, combinations of chapel, hall, library, and residential quarters within single complexes. These arrangements fostered intense intellectual communities while providing institutional continuity, transcending individual masters or students. Student mobility between universities created international scholarly networks. Archaeological evidence from university towns reveals cosmopolitan communities. Pottery and personal items from across Europe found in student lodgings. University records preserve evidence of scholars studying at multiple institutions: law at Bologna, theology at Paris, philosophy at Oxford. This mobility facilitated intellectual exchange while standardizing educational practices across Europe. The liberal arts curriculum, inherited from classical tradition but adapted for Christian purposes, provided foundational education for all university students. The trivium grammar, rhetoric, logic developed linguistic and analytical skills. The quadrivium arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, music introduced mathematical and scientific knowledge. Archaeological investigations of university libraries reveal curriculum through surviving manuscripts, classical texts, medieval commentaries, and contemporary scholarly works. Master-student relationships, formalized through degree ceremonies, created hierarchical structures governing intellectual authority. The Licentia Docendi granted masters authority to teach throughout Christendom. Archaeological evidence from degree ceremonies includes special vestments, ceremonial objects, and architectural spaces designed for academic rituals. These traditions, preserved in university archives, established patterns of academic certification lasting to the present day. Brother Thomas Aquinas arrived in Paris around 1245, carrying manuscript copies of Aristotle newly translated from Arabic sources, determined to reconcile classical philosophy with Christian revelation. The young Dominican friar could not have anticipated that his synthesis would dominate European intellectual life for centuries, but archaeological evidence from his study cell at the convent of Saint-Jacques reveals the intensive scholarly apparatus supporting his revolutionary work. Greek and Arabic texts, patristic commentaries, and sophisticated writing materials imported from across Europe. Aquinas' Summa Theologica, begun around 1265, attempted nothing less than complete systematization of Christian knowledge using Aristotelian philosophical methods. The works scale over 3,000 articles addressing every aspect of divine and human knowledge required unprecedented scholarly organization. Archaeological investigations of medieval scriptoriums reveal the collaborative processes supporting such massive projects. Teams of copyists, correctors, and illuminators working under systematic supervision. The Dominican intellectual tradition, established by the order's emphasis on preaching and teaching, provided institutional support for Aquinas' scholarly work. Archaeological evidence from Dominican convents reveals sophisticated libraries, specialized collection areas for different subjects, copying workshops equipped with the finest materials, and study facilities designed for intensive research. The order of preachers recognized that effective preaching required mastery of contemporary intellectual developments. Aristotelian philosophy posed fundamental challenges to Christian doctrine. The philosopher's eternal world contradicted creation accounts. His emphasis on natural causation seemed to eliminate divine intervention. His apparent denial of personal immortality undermined Christian eschatology. Aquinas' achievement lay in demonstrating how Aristotelian methods could strengthen rather than weaken Christian theology. The doctrine of double truth, attributed to Averroes and Latin Averroists like Siger of Brabant, claimed philosophical and theological truths could contradict each other without logical problems. Aquinas rejected this solution, insisting that truth was unified while human knowledge remained limited. Archaeological evidence from university disputations reveals the intensity of these debates. Surviving manuscripts show corrections, additions, and marginal comments reflecting ongoing intellectual combat. Albertus Magnus, Aquinas' teacher and Dominican predecessor, established foundations for medieval natural philosophy through systematic study of Aristotelian scientific works. His encyclopedia, covering everything from mineralogy to zoology, demonstrated how Christian scholars could engage classical scientific knowledge without compromising religious commitments. Archaeological investigations of Albertus's laboratory at Cologne reveal sophisticated experimental apparatus, alchemical equipment, botanical specimens, and zoological collections that supported empirical research. The reception of Arabic scientific and philosophical works, primarily through translations produced in Spain and southern Italy, revolutionized European intellectual life. Gerard of Cremona's translations at Toledo included over 80 Arabic works, Aristotelian treatises, mathematical texts, astronomical works, and medical manuals. Archaeological evidence from translation centers reveals international scholarly collaboration. Arabic, Hebrew, and Latin manuscripts in the same workshops, specialized dictionaries for technical terminology, and systematic procedures for ensuring accuracy. Roger Bacon's Opus Maius, completed around 1267, advocated experimental methods that would influence European scientific development for centuries. Writing from Oxford, Bacon criticized contemporary reliance on authority and tradition, arguing that direct observation and mathematical analysis provided superior paths to knowledge. Archaeological investigations of Bacon's laboratory reveal experimental apparatus, optical instruments, mathematical calculating devices, and alchemical equipment supporting his innovative research methods. Bacon's optical studies, building on Arabic works by Alhazen and others, established foundations for European physics. His analysis of light transmission, reflection, and refraction combined theoretical understanding with practical experimentation. Archaeological evidence from Oxford scientific libraries reveals the manuscript tradition preserving these optical investigations. Diagrams showing experimental setups, mathematical calculations, and detailed observations of optical phenomena. The controversy surrounding Bacon's methods reflected broader tensions within 13th century intellectual culture. Conservative authorities feared that excessive emphasis on natural philosophy might undermine religious faith. The condemnations of 1277 at Paris specifically targeted propositions that seemed to limit divine power through natural necessity. Archaeological evidence from university libraries shows systematic removal of prohibited works, erasures, missing pages, and marginal warnings in surviving manuscripts. Duns Scotus, teaching at Oxford and Paris around 1300, developed philosophical alternatives to Thomistic synthesis that would influence late medieval thought. His emphasis on divine will rather than divine reason, individual essence rather than universal nature, and complex logical distinctions created more flexible philosophical approaches. Archaeological investigations of Franciscan libraries reveal Scotist manuscripts, commentaries on Aristotle, theological disputations and logical treatises that established Scotist schools throughout Europe. William of Ockham's Philosophical Revolution, developed at Oxford around 1320, challenged fundamental assumptions underlying 13th century scholasticism. His principle of parsimony, Occam's razor, insisted that explanations should avoid unnecessary complexity. Archaeological evidence from Ockham's Franciscan convent reveals intense scholarly activity. Multiple manuscript versions of the same works, extensive marginal corrections, and systematic revisions reflecting ongoing intellectual development. The nominalist controversy, initiated by Ockham's rejection of universal essences, fundamentally altered European philosophical development. Archaeological investigations of university libraries reveal the debate's intensity. Manuscript annotations showing fierce disagreements, works condemned and removed from circulation, and systematic development of opposing realist and nominalist schools. These philosophical divisions would influence European intellectual life through the Renaissance and Reformation. Late medieval philosophical developments prepared foundations for Renaissance and modern intellectual innovations. The emphasis on individual knowledge, empirical observation, and critical analysis of traditional authorities all emerge from scholastic debates. Archaeological evidence from 14th century universities reveals continuing intellectual vitality. New works on logic, natural philosophy, and political theory that would influence European thought for centuries. The translation movement's broader impact extended far beyond philosophical texts to include scientific, mathematical, and medical works that transformed European intellectual capabilities. Archaeological investigations of medieval libraries reveal the extraordinary scope of this cultural transfer. Astronomical tables enabling more accurate calendar calculations, mathematical treatises introducing algebraic methods, medical texts describing surgical procedures and pharmaceutical preparations unknown in European tradition. In the year 1347, ships limping into Messina's harbour carried more than Eastern goods, they brought death itself, as the Black Death prepared to transform European civilization forever. The merchant galleys that had connected Europe to Eastern markets through centuries of profitable trade now brought catastrophe beyond imagination. Genoese sailors, their bodies covered in black boils, died at their oars before reaching port. Within days, the pestilence that had devastated Asia and the Middle East began its inexorable march across Europe. Contemporary chroniclers struggle to comprehend the disaster's magnitude. Michel de Piazza, writing from Sicily, recorded the plague's arrival. In the month of October 1347, around the beginning of the month, 12 Genoese galleys, fleeing from the divine wrath which our Lord had sent upon them for their iniquities, entered the port of Messina. Archaeological excavations at medieval Messina reveal evidence of this catastrophic moment. Hastily abandoned warehouses, mass burial sites, and layers of ash from buildings burned to contain infection. The plague that reached Europe in 1347 had already devastated much of Asia and the Islamic world. Contemporary Arab chroniclers like Ibn al-Wadi described its eastern origins. It began in the land of darkness. God sent it to his people so that he might forgive them and so that he might gather them to his mercy. Archaeological evidence from plague pit excavations across Central Asia reveals the disease's westward progression. DNA analysis of plague bacteria confirms Yersinia pestis as the causative agent, while carbon dating shows systematic waves of mortality moving along trade routes. Italian port cities provided perfect entry points for the pandemic. Archaeological investigations at Genoa, Venice, and Pisa reveal evidence of desperate attempts to contain the plague. Harbour facilities hastily abandoned, quarantine stations built on offshore islands, and systematic burning of infected goods. The Chronicon Estense records Genoese authorities' futile efforts. They ordered that no person should receive the infected galleys, but it was too late, for the plague had already begun to spread through the city. From Mediterranean ports, the plague spread with terrifying speed along Europe's commercial networks. Archaeological evidence traces its progress through ceramic and coin distributions. Plague period layers show dramatic disruptions in trade patterns, with luxury goods disappearing from archaeological contexts, while local pottery production simplifies and standardizes. The very commercial prosperity that had defined the High Middle Ages now facilitated Europe's greatest demographic catastrophe. The mortality rates defied contemporary comprehension. Giovanni Boccaccio, writing in plague-ravaged Florence, estimated that 100,000 people died in his city alone. Modern demographic analysis suggests Europe lost between 1/3 and 1/2 of its population between 1347 and 1351. Archaeological evidence from cemetery excavations supports these devastating figures. Mass graves in London contain over 2,400 individuals, Paris plague pits hold thousands more, and rural graveyards throughout Europe show evidence of hasty, multiple burials. Contemporary medical knowledge proved utterly inadequate against the plague's multiple forms. Bubonic plague, marked by painful swellings in lymph nodes, killed perhaps 60% of victims. Pneumonic plague, attacking lungs and transmitted by breathing, proved nearly 100% fatal. Septicemic plague, infecting blood directly, killed so rapidly that victims often died without developing characteristic symptoms. Archaeological analysis of plague victims reveals evidence of all three forms, with skeletal markers indicating the disease's devastating physiological impact. Social disruption extended far beyond mortality statistics. The Chronica Senese records how normal social bonds collapsed. Father abandoned child, wife husband, one brother another, for this illness seemed to strike through breath and sight. Archaeological evidence from abandoned settlements reveals the social fabric's complete breakdown. Houses left with valuable goods still inside, agricultural implements abandoned in fields, and systematic neglect of infrastructure maintenance. Economic consequences proved revolutionary rather than merely destructive. Labour shortages empowered surviving peasants and workers to demand higher wages and better conditions. The Statute of Labourers, enacted in England in 1351, attempted to freeze wages at pre-plague levels but proved largely unenforceable. Archaeological evidence from rural sites shows improved peasant living standards after 1350. Better quality pottery in peasant houses, more meat in diets evidenced by bone assemblages, and increased personal possessions in burial contexts. Urban wage labourers gained even greater leverage over employers. Guild records from across Europe document systematic wage increases and shortened working hours during the plague's aftermath. Archaeological investigations of craft workshops reveal technological improvements and increased mechanization as masters sought to compensate for labour shortages. Water-powered machinery became more common, production techniques were simplified and standardized, and workshop organization became more efficient. The plague's cultural impact manifested in obsessive focus on mortality and judgment. The Danse Macabre, or Dance of Death, appeared in art and literature throughout plague-affected regions. Archaeological evidence from church wall paintings reveals this theme's popularity. Skeletal figures dancing with representatives of all social classes, emphasizing death's universality and the futility of earthly status. These images reflected profound psychological trauma that would influence European culture for centuries. Religious responses varied dramatically across different regions and social groups. Some communities increased religious devotion, founding new churches and religious houses in thanksgiving for survival. Archaeological evidence from monastery sites shows systematic expansion during the later 14th century, as plague survivors donated wealth to religious institutions. Pilgrimage sites experienced unprecedented visiting, evidenced by increased quantities of pilgrim badges and expanded hospitaller facilities. Flagellant movements represented more extreme religious responses to the plague crisis. These groups, practicing public self-torture as penance for humanity's sins, spread rapidly across Germany and Eastern Europe during 1348 to 1349. Contemporary chronicles describe processions of hundreds of flagellants moving between towns, performing ritualized beatings while calling for repentance. Archaeological evidence from flagellant gathering sites reveals evidence of these activities. Worn stone platforms, evidence of large crowds and religious artifacts left as offerings. The search for scapegoats produced Europe's worst anti-Semitic persecution since the First Crusade. Jewish communities from Spain to Poland faced accusations of well poisoning and systematic massacre. Archaeological excavations of Jewish quarters in cities like Strasbourg, Mainz, and Cologne reveal evidence of violent destruction during 1348-1349. burned synagogues, destroyed mikveh baths, and mass graves containing entire communities. Contemporary Hebrew chronicles like the Sefer Gezerot preserve heartbreaking accounts of these persecutions. Medical responses evolved slowly but systematically during and after the plague. University medical schools, particularly at Montpellier and Padua, began systematic study of plague symptoms and treatments. Archaeological investigations of medieval hospitals reveal architectural modifications made to accommodate plague patients, isolation wards, improved ventilation systems, and expanded morgue facilities. These developments laid foundations for more sophisticated approaches to epidemic disease. Agricultural recovery took decades, but eventually produced more efficient farming systems. Archaeological evidence from deserted medieval villages shows systematic consolidation of holdings. Multiple peasant plots combined into larger, more efficient units. The three-field system evolved into more flexible crop rotations. Archaeological pollen analysis reveals increased cultivation of legumes and industrial crops, and pastoral farming expanded in areas where grain cultivation proved uneconomical. Urban recovery followed different patterns in different regions. Italian cities generally recovered population and prosperity more quickly than northern European centres. Archaeological evidence reveals systematic urban reconstruction. Wider streets designed to improve sanitation, public health measures including sewage systems, and zoning restrictions separating residential and industrial areas. These improvements reflected hard-learned lessons about disease transmission and urban management. The thunder of English longbows at Crécy on August 26, 1346, announced a new era in European warfare just as the Black Death was about to transform European society. King Edward III's victory over Philip VI of France demonstrated how military innovation could overcome traditional feudal superiority, while beginning a conflict that would ravage both kingdoms for over a century. Archaeological investigations of the Crécy battlefield reveal evidence supporting contemporary accounts. Arrowheads scattered across the field, fragments of French armour, and mass graves containing noble casualties who had dominated medieval warfare for centuries. The 100 Years' War, 1337-1453, emerged from complex feudal relationships dating to the Norman conquest. Edward III's claim to the French throne through his mother Isabella created dynastic conflicts complicated by territorial disputes over Gascony and Flanders. The Caroline War, as contemporary French chronicles called it, represented more than royal ambition. It marked the collision between emerging national identities and traditional feudal loyalties. Archaeological evidence from English archer training sites reveals the systematic military preparation underlying English successes. Excavations at medieval archery butts show evidence of intensive practice. Thousands of arrowheads, target fragments, and systematic ground preparation. Contemporary documents mandate archery practice for all able-bodied men, while archaeological evidence from English rural sites shows widespread manufacture of longbows and arrows. This represented Europe's first systematic military mobilization of an entire population. The Battle of Poitiers in 1356 repeated Crécy's tactical lessons while demonstrating the war's escalating brutality. Edward the Black Prince's capture of King John II of France shocked contemporary observers accustomed to more chivalrous warfare. Archaeological investigations reveal evidence of the battle's ferocity. Mass graves containing both noble and common soldiers, weapons caches hastily buried, and systematic looting of defeated French forces. The Chandos Herald's account emphasizes the battle's turning point. The French were totally defeated and their king taken prisoner. French recovery under Charles V, 1364-1380, demonstrated adaptive military leadership learning from earlier disasters. The Constable Bertrand du Guesclin developed new tactical approaches avoiding direct confrontation with English armies while systematically recovering lost territories. Archaeological evidence from French fortifications built during this period reveals innovative defensive techniques, improved artillery positions, enhanced siege-resistant architecture, and systematic territorial defense networks. The war's social impact extended far beyond military campaigns. Companies of unemployed soldiers, called routiers or free companies, devastated France during truces between major campaigns. Archaeological evidence from French rural sites reveals systematic destruction, burned villages, abandoned farmsteads, and defensive modifications to churches and manor houses. Contemporary chronicles like the Chronique des Quatre Premiers Valois describe the terror these mercenary bands inspired throughout the countryside. Joan of Arc's intervention in 1429 represented one of medieval history's most remarkable episodes. The 17-year-old peasant girl from Domremy claimed divine visions commanding her to crown the Dauphin at Reims and expel the English from France. Archaeological investigations at Orléans reveal evidence of the siege that made Joan famous. English fortifications, French counterworks, and evidence of the systematic bombardment that preceded the English withdrawal. Joan's military career, though brief, demonstrated charismatic leadership's power over demoralized populations. Contemporary accounts describe her impact on French morale. Soldiers who had fled before English forces now advanced eagerly into battle. Archaeological evidence from Patay battlefield shows the completeness of French victory under Joan's inspiration. English weapons abandoned in retreat, French pursuit evidence across miles of countryside, and minimal French casualties despite overwhelming tactical success. Joan's capture at Compiègne in 1430 and subsequent trial for heresy revealed the intersection of military, political, and religious conflicts characterizing late medieval warfare. The trial records, preserved in the Bibliothèque Nationale, document systematic attempts to discredit Joan's divine claims while providing unprecedented insights into medieval attitudes toward prophecy, gender roles, and political authority. Archaeological investigations at Rouen reveal evidence of the execution site where Joan died on May 30th, 1431. The Great Schism, 1378-1417, fragmented papal authority just as secular warfare was devastating France and England. The election of Urban VI in Rome and Clément VII in Avignon created competing papal obediences that divided European Christendom along political lines. Archaeological evidence from both papal courts reveals systematic construction programs, as each papacy sought to demonstrate legitimate authority through architectural grandeur and administrative expansion. The Council of Constance, 1414-1418, resolved the schism through conciliar theory that temporarily subordinated papal authority to council decisions. Contemporary accounts describe the gathering's unprecedented scale: over 700 ecclesiastical dignitaries, thousands of lesser clergy, and representatives from across Europe. Archaeological investigations at Constance reveal systematic preparations for this massive gathering. Expanded lodging facilities, enlarged meeting spaces, and improved transportation infrastructure. The rise of national monarchies during this period fundamentally altered European political organization. Archaeological evidence reveals systematic administrative development. Royal chanceries expanded and standardized, taxation systems became more sophisticated, and royal residences grew in size and complexity. Contemporary documents show systematic legal centralization, with royal courts increasingly superseding local feudal jurisdictions. The emergence of standing armies represented another fundamental change in medieval military organization. Archaeological evidence from French and English military sites reveals systematic transitions from feudal levy systems to professional military forces. Uniform equipment becomes more common, specialized military architecture appears, and evidence of systematic drill and training emerges in archaeological contexts. Artillery development transformed siege warfare during this period. Archaeological investigations at castle sites reveal systematic adaptation to gunpowder weapons. Walls lowered and thickened, bastions designed for artillery placement, and older vertical defences modified for horizontal resistance. The Siege of Constantinople in 1453 demonstrated cannon's devastating effectiveness against even the strongest medieval fortifications. The fall of Constantinople on May 29, 1453, ended both the Byzantine Empire and the medieval period's defining conflict between Christianity and Islam. Mehmet II's systematic siege, using the largest cannons yet constructed, overcame Constantinople's legendary defences after nearly 8 weeks of bombardment. Archaeological investigations reveal evidence of the siege's intensity. Cannonballs embedded in city walls destroyed buildings throughout the city and mass graves from the final assault. The Ottoman advance into southeastern Europe represented medieval Christianity's greatest territorial loss since the initial Islamic conquests. Archaeological evidence from Balkan sites reveals systematic Ottoman colonization, new administrative centers, mosque construction, and evidence of population displacement. Contemporary Greek chronicles describe the transformation of Christian societies under Ottoman rule, while Ottoman administrative records document systematic conversion of churches to mosques and implementation of Islamic legal systems. The summer of 1358 erupted in violence across northern France as peasants, crushed by war taxation and noble exploitation, rose in desperate rebellion. The Jacquerie, named for the common French name Jacques, represented medieval Europe's most widespread popular uprising. Contemporary chronicles like the Chronique des Quatre Premiers Valois record the rebellion's savagery. They killed knights and squires and their wives and children, and did worse things than any mortal could imagine. Archaeological evidence from noble residences reveals systematic destruction. Burned manor houses, demolished fortifications, and evidence of hasty flight by aristocratic families. The Jacquerie's causes reflected broader social tensions created by warfare and plague. Archaeological evidence from French rural sites shows declining living standards during the 1350s. Poorer quality pottery in peasant houses, reduced meat consumption evidenced by bone assemblages, and systematic abandonment of marginal agricultural lands. War taxation imposed by King John II to pay his English ransom after Poitiers pushed peasant communities beyond their breaking point. The rebellion's suppression by Charles the Bad of Navarre and noble allies demonstrated ruling class solidarity despite their political divisions. Contemporary accounts describe systematic retribution, entire villages destroyed, peasant leaders executed, and harsh measures imposed to prevent future uprisings. Archaeological evidence from rebellion sites reveals evidence of this repression. Burned peasant houses never rebuilt, abandoned villages, and defensive modifications to surviving noble residences. The English peasants' revolt of 1381 represented more organised resistance to royal authority. Led by figures like Wat Tyler and inspired by radical preachers like John Ball, English rebels demanded fundamental social changes: abolition of serfdom, elimination of labour legislation, and reduction of royal taxation. Archaeological evidence from London reveals the revolt's urban dimensions: damage to government buildings, evidence of systematic attacks on legal records, and temporary occupation of royal facilities. The rebels' demands, preserved in contemporary chronicles, revealed sophisticated understanding of their grievances. John Ball's famous sermon, When Adam Delved and Eve Span, who was then the gentleman, challenged fundamental assumptions about social hierarchy that had governed medieval society since the feudal system's emergence. Archaeological evidence from peasant sites shows continuing social tensions. Defensive modifications to village layouts, evidence of collective organization, and systematic resistance to traditional obligations. Urban uprisings throughout this period reflected similar tensions between traditional guild authorities and emerging capitalist organization. The Ciompi Revolt in Florence, 1378, saw wool workers temporarily seize control of city government, establishing a commune of labourers that challenged merchant oligarchy. Archaeological evidence from Florentine workshops reveals the conflict's economic foundations: technological changes reducing skilled labour requirements, evidence of systematic wage suppression, and increasing concentration of production in fewer, larger workshops. The banking revolution accelerated during this period as traditional commercial relationships proved inadequate for increasingly complex international transactions. The Medici Bank, established by Giovanni de' Medici around 1397, pioneered financial techniques that would dominate European commerce for centuries. Archaeological investigations of Medici palaces reveal evidence of systematic record-keeping, purpose-built accounting chambers, sophisticated security arrangements, and communication systems connecting branches across Europe. Double-entry bookkeeping developed by Italian merchants and systematized in Luca Pacioli's Summa de Arithmetica, 1494, revolutionized commercial accounting. Archaeological evidence from merchant houses reveals the spread of these techniques. Specialized furniture for accounting work, standardized ledger formats, and systematic filing systems for commercial correspondence. Contemporary business records preserved in European archives document the sophisticated financial instruments enabling long-distance trade, bills of exchange, letters of credit, and insurance contracts. The printing revolution, initiated by Johann Gutenberg's innovations around 1440, transformed European intellectual life more profoundly than any development since the alphabet's invention. Archaeological investigations of early printing workshops reveal the technology's rapid development, improved type designs, better paper manufacturing, and systematic mechanization of book production. The Gutenberg Bible, completed around 1455, demonstrated printing's potential while establishing technical standards followed throughout Europe. Printing's impact on European society proved revolutionary rather than merely technological. Archaeological evidence from book ownership patterns shows dramatic increases in literacy rates. Personal libraries become common in merchant and artisan households. Specialized spaces for reading appear in residential architecture, and evidence of book circulation through lending libraries and reading societies. Contemporary documents describe printing's social impact. Protestant reformers using printed pamphlets to spread religious ideas, secular authorities attempting to censor printed materials, and systematic transformation of educational practices. Gunpowder technology, imported from China through Islamic intermediaries, transformed both military and civilian life during this period. Archaeological evidence from weapon manufacturing sites reveals rapid technological development, improved metallurgy for cannon production, systematic development of small firearms, and evidence of specialized military engineering. Contemporary military treatises describe tactical innovations necessitated by gunpowder weapons, new fortification designs, changes in battle formations, and systematic training for artillery crews. Ocean navigation improvements enabled European expansion beyond Mediterranean and coastal Atlantic waters. Archaeological investigations of shipwrecks from this period reveal systematic technological advances, improved hull designs for ocean sailing, better rigging systems, and navigation instruments borrowed from Islamic and Chinese sources. The development of the caravel, combining Mediterranean and Atlantic shipbuilding traditions, created vessels capable of sustained ocean exploration. Renaissance humanism challenged medieval intellectual traditions through systematic revival of classical learning, combined with emphasis on individual dignity and potential. Archaeological evidence from humanist libraries reveals this movement's scholarly foundations. Greek manuscripts imported from Byzantium after Constantinople's fall, systematic copying of classical texts, and evidence of intensive philological study. Contemporary humanist writings like Pico della Mirandola's Oration on the Dignity of Man articulated philosophical positions fundamentally different from medieval scholasticism. The invention of movable-type printing made humanist ideas widely accessible for the first time. Archaeological evidence from printing workshops reveals systematic production of classical texts. Standardized editions of Cicero, Virgil, and other ancient authors, systematic development of Greek-type fonts, and evidence of international scholarly collaboration. Contemporary correspondence between humanist scholars documents the intellectual networks enabled by printing technology. Educational reforms initiated by humanist educators transformed European intellectual development. Archaeological investigations of schools reveal architectural modifications supporting new pedagogical approaches, individual study spaces, specialized libraries, and facilities for scientific observation. Contemporary educational treatises describe systematic changes in curriculum, increased emphasis on classical languages, systematic study of history and moral philosophy, and reduced emphasis on medieval scholastic methods. The emergence of Renaissance art and architecture during this period reflected broader cultural transformations, emphasizing human dignity and individual achievement. Archaeological investigations of Renaissance workshops reveal technological innovations supporting artistic development, improved pigment preparation, systematic study of human anatomy, and mathematical approaches to perspective and proportion. Contemporary artistic treatises like Leon Battista Alberti's writings on painting and architecture document systematic theoretical development accompanying practical innovations. Banking families like the Medici used artistic patronage to demonstrate cultural authority while supporting artistic innovation. Archaeological evidence from Medici residences reveals systematic art collection, purpose-built galleries, specialized storage for artworks, and evidence of international artistic exchange. Contemporary documents describe systematic artistic commissions, detailed contracts with artists, specifications for artistic programs, and evidence of systematic aesthetic planning. As the year 1500 dawned across European cathedral spires, the medieval world had not ended. It had transformed itself into something unprecedented in human history. From monastery scriptoriums came the printing presses that would democratize knowledge. From castle walls emerged the artillery fortifications that would dominate modern warfare. From guild workshops rose the banking houses that would finance global exploration. The bells that had called medieval Christians to prayer now rang over a continent poised to reshape the entire world. Archaeological investigations across Europe reveal not disruption but continuity. Medieval institutions adapting, medieval technologies evolving, medieval ideas flowering into Renaissance humanism and Reformation theology. The year 1500 marked not medieval civilization's death, but its metamorphosis into modernity itself. The University of Paris welcomed over 4,000 students as the 16th century began, its lecture halls echoing with debates that had raged since Thomas Aquinas first reconciled Aristotle with Christianity 2 centuries earlier. Archaeological excavations of the Latin Quarter reveal systematic expansion throughout the 15th century. New colleges built to accommodate growing enrollments, specialized libraries housing thousands of manuscripts, and residential facilities for international scholarly communities. Medieval Europe's greatest institutional innovation had become the foundation of all higher education. The university system's achievement extended far beyond mere institutional survival. Contemporary enrollment records show over 100,000 students attending European universities by 1500, creating the largest educated population in human history to that date. Archaeological evidence from university towns reveals the social infrastructure supporting this educational revolution. Bookshops clustering around academic centres, specialized scribal workshops, and systematic production of academic materials. The Registrum Universitatis preserved at Bologna documents student mobility across national boundaries, with scholars studying law at Bologna, theology at Paris, medicine at Montpellier, and natural philosophy at Oxford. Legal education, beginning with Aneris's lectures on Roman law around 1088, had created systematic jurisprudence governing European society. Archaeological investigations of law courts reveal standardized architectural features reflecting common legal procedures, witness stands, jury seating, and judicial benches following patterns established in medieval university training. The Corpus Juris Civilis, rediscovered and systematically studied throughout the medieval period, provided foundations for civil law systems still governing continental Europe today. Common law development in England created parallel traditions equally influential for modern legal systems. Archaeological evidence from English court sites shows evolutionary development from feudal manor courts to sophisticated royal judicial systems. The Bracton Treatise, compiled around 1250, established legal principles that would influence English-speaking legal traditions for centuries. Contemporary legal records preserved in the Public Record Office document systematic case law development that created precedent-based judicial systems still governing Anglo-American legal traditions. Gothic architecture represented medieval engineering at its most spectacular achievement. Archaeological investigations reveal construction techniques that pushed medieval technology to its absolute limits. Flying buttresses distributing weight loads, pointed arches enabling unprecedented heights, and rose windows combining structural necessity with artistic beauty. The Cathedral of Amiens, completed around 1270, demonstrates Gothic engineering mastery. Interior heights reaching 140 feet, wall surfaces almost entirely replaced by stained glass, and structural systems enabling construction previously considered impossible. Structural analysis of Gothic cathedrals reveals sophisticated understanding of physics and mathematics that would not be systematically codified until the 17th century. Archaeological investigation of construction techniques shows systematic experimentation. Architects testing load-bearing capabilities, developing innovative joint systems, and creating construction procedures requiring unprecedented precision. Contemporary building accounts preserved in cathedral archives document systematic collaboration between master builders, mathematicians, and craftsmen that prefigured Renaissance artistic workshops. Agricultural innovations developed throughout the medieval period created productivity levels supporting much larger populations than previously possible. Archaeological evidence from rural sites reveals systematic technological development. Heavy ploughs enabling cultivation of dense soils, three-field rotations increasing yields by 50%, and water-powered mills mechanizing grain processing. The Norfolk four-course system, emerging around 1300, demonstrated agricultural techniques that would not be surpassed until 18th century improvements. Demographic studies based on archaeological evidence show European population growing from perhaps 25 million in 1000 to over 70 million by 1300, supported by medieval agricultural innovations. Contemporary agricultural treatises like Walter of Henley's Husbandry document systematic approaches to farming, soil analysis, crop rotation schedules, and livestock management techniques that maximized productivity while maintaining soil fertility. Archaeological investigations of medieval farms reveal evidence of systematic experimentation with new crops, breeding programs, and technological innovations. Manuscript preservation throughout the medieval period saved classical learning while creating new intellectual traditions that would define Western civilization. Archaeological investigations of monastery libraries reveal the systematic nature of this preservation effort. Specialized copying workshops, sophisticated storage systems, and international networks for manuscript exchange. The Library of Monte Cassino, rebuilt after World War II bombing, contained over 1,800 medieval manuscripts preserving works by classical authors alongside medieval theological and philosophical treatises. The scholastic synthesis achieved by medieval philosophers like Thomas Aquinas created intellectual frameworks that influenced European thought for centuries. Contemporary manuscript traditions show systematic development of logical methods, systematic theology, and natural philosophy that provided foundations for Renaissance humanism and scientific revolution. Archaeological evidence from university libraries reveals the international character of medieval intellectual development. Manuscripts from across Europe showing common intellectual traditions despite political divisions. Cultural synthesis achieved by medieval civilization combined Germanic, Roman, Celtic, and Christian traditions into distinctively European cultural patterns. Archaeological investigations reveal systematic cultural integration, artistic styles combining diverse traditions, architectural forms synthesizing Roman engineering with Germanic craftsmanship, and literary traditions preserving classical forms while developing vernacular innovations. The Arthurian literature, developing throughout the medieval period, demonstrates cultural creativity that influenced European imagination for centuries. Musical development during the medieval period created harmonic and notational systems that remain foundations of Western musical tradition. Archaeological investigations of medieval churches reveal systematic acoustic planning supporting polyphonic development. Contemporary musical manuscripts preserve evidence of systematic musical theory development, from Gregorian chant through polyphonic innovations that created musical complexity, rivaling any later achievements. The School of Notre Dame, active around 1160-1250, developed harmonic techniques that established Western musical traditions. Urban development throughout the medieval period created city planning principles and governmental institutions that continue governing European urban life. Archaeological investigations reveal systematic approaches to urban organisation, zoning separating residential, commercial and industrial areas, public health measures including sewage systems, and governmental institutions managing complex urban societies. Contemporary urban records document legal innovations that created municipal corporations, guild regulations, and commercial law systems enabling urban prosperity. The institutional foundations established during the medieval period proved remarkably durable, adapting to changing circumstances while maintaining essential characteristics. Universities retained their international character, academic freedom, and degree-granting authority through political upheavals that destroyed kingdoms and empires. Archaeological evidence from university sites shows continuous occupation and expansion through Renaissance, Reformation, and Enlightenment periods, with architectural additions reflecting changing educational needs while preserving essential collegiate structures. Contemporary university records document curricular evolution that maintained medieval foundations while incorporating new knowledge. The trivium and quadrivium remained basic educational components, though natural philosophy expanded to include systematic empirical investigation. Scholastic disputation methods evolved into scientific experimentation, while maintaining logical rigour established by medieval philosophers. Archaeological investigations of Renaissance laboratories show continuity with medieval scholarly workshops. Systematic organisation, international correspondence, and collaborative research methods pioneered by medieval universities. Legal systems developed during the medieval period proved equally persistent. Common law traditions established in England expanded throughout British colonial territories, creating legal systems governing billions of people worldwide. Archaeological evidence from court buildings shows architectural continuity, reflecting procedural consistency across centuries. Contemporary legal documents demonstrate systematic development of precedent-based jurisprudence that maintained medieval principles while adapting to changing social conditions. Civil law systems based on Roman law rediscovered during the medieval period continue governing continental European legal traditions. Archaeological investigations of law libraries reveal manuscript traditions preserving medieval legal commentaries alongside contemporary legal development. The Corpus Juris Civilis, systematically studied by medieval legal scholars, remains fundamental to European legal education, demonstrating intellectual continuity spanning nearly a millennium. Economic institutions developed during the medieval period created foundations for capitalist development, while maintaining essential characteristics established by guild systems and medieval banking houses. Archaeological evidence from commercial centres shows continuous development of trading facilities, financial institutions and manufacturing workshops that maintained medieval organisational principles while adapting to expanded markets and new technologies. Contemporary commercial documents preserved in European archives demonstrate systematic development of financial instruments pioneered by medieval merchants, bills of exchange, letters of credit, and insurance contracts that enabled international commerce. The Medici banking system, established during the late medieval period, created organizational models that influenced European financial development through the early modern period. Archaeological investigations of banking facilities reveal architectural continuity, reflecting functional consistency across centuries of economic development. Religious institutions established during the medieval period maintained their essential characteristics while adapting to Reformation challenges and Renaissance cultural changes. Archaeological evidence from monastery and cathedral sites shows continuous occupation and systematic adaptation. Buildings modified for changing liturgical needs, educational facilities expanded, and architectural additions reflecting evolving religious practices while preserving essential medieval foundations. Contemporary religious documents demonstrate intellectual continuity, linking medieval scholastic theology with Renaissance humanism and Reformation theology. Archaeological investigations of religious libraries reveal manuscript traditions preserving medieval theological works, alongside Renaissance and Reformation developments. The systematic theology developed by medieval scholars like Thomas Aquinas continued influencing Christian intellectual tradition through all subsequent theological development. Cultural traditions established during the medieval period showed remarkable persistence, despite dramatic political and social changes. Chivalric ideals influenced European social behaviour through the 18th century, evidenced by contemporary literature, court ceremonials, and artistic representation. Archaeological investigations of noble residences reveal architectural features supporting chivalric culture. Great halls for ceremonial gatherings, private chapels reflecting religious obligations, and defensive features maintaining military associations. Vernacular literature traditions established during the medieval period created national literary cultures that continue defining European cultural identity. The Arthurian tradition, developing throughout the medieval period, influenced European literature through the Romantic movement and beyond. Contemporary manuscript traditions show systematic preservation of medieval literary works alongside continued creative development within established forms and themes. Urban governance systems developed during the medieval period established municipal institutions that continue governing European cities. Archaeological evidence from city halls and civic buildings shows architectural continuity, reflecting institutional consistency. Contemporary civic records document systematic development of urban law, municipal finance, and public services that maintained medieval foundations while adapting to changing urban populations and economic conditions. The year 1500 represented not medieval civilization's ending, but its transformation into unprecedented global influence. Christopher Columbus, trained in medieval navigation techniques and funded by banking systems developed during the Commercial Revolution, had reached the Americas 8 years earlier. Vasco da Gama, using navigational instruments perfected in medieval workshops, had sailed to India around Africa's Cape. Medieval Europe's accumulated knowledge, technological innovations, and institutional developments were about to reshape the entire world. Archaeological investigations of late medieval navigation workshops reveal technological continuity, linking medieval innovations with Age of Exploration achievements. The caravel, developed during the 15th century, combined Mediterranean and Atlantic shipbuilding traditions established over centuries of medieval commercial development. Contemporary navigation manuals preserve medieval astronomical knowledge, systematic coastal observations, and mathematical techniques that enabled oceanic exploration. Medieval Europe's technological and intellectual achievements were becoming global influences. The printing revolution, beginning with Johann Gutenberg's innovations around 1440, democratized knowledge preserved and developed throughout the medieval period. Archaeological evidence from early printing workshops reveals systematic adaptation of medieval manuscript production techniques. Type designs based on medieval scripts, printing procedures following scribal workshop organization, and distribution networks utilizing medieval commercial systems. Contemporary printing records document systematic reproduction of medieval texts alongside new Renaissance works, ensuring intellectual continuity while enabling unprecedented knowledge dissemination. Religious transformation during the Reformation utilized printing technology to spread theological ideas developed within medieval intellectual traditions. Archaeological evidence from Protestant regions shows systematic adaptation of medieval church buildings for Reformed worship, while preserving essential architectural features. Contemporary religious documents demonstrate intellectual continuity, linking medieval scholastic theology with Reformation theological development. Medieval institutional foundations provided frameworks within which religious reformation occurred rather than being destroyed by it. National state development during this period built upon medieval kingdoms' administrative innovations, while expanding governmental capabilities through improved communication and military technologies. Archaeological evidence from royal palaces and administrative centres shows architectural continuity, reflecting institutional development rather than revolutionary change. Contemporary administrative documents demonstrate systematic expansion of governmental functions pioneered during the medieval period. Centralized justice systems, systematic taxation, and military organization that maintained feudal elements while adapting to gunpowder warfare. Scientific method development during the 16th century evolved from scholastic logical procedures established by medieval university philosophers. Archaeological investigations of early scientific workshops reveal continuity with medieval scholarly practices. Systematic observation, international correspondence, and collaborative research methods pioneered by medieval universities. Contemporary scientific documents demonstrate intellectual continuity, linking medieval natural philosophy with Renaissance empirical investigation, showing systematic development rather than revolutionary replacement of medieval intellectual traditions. Banking and commercial development during the early modern period expanded financial techniques, pioneered by medieval merchant houses, while utilizing institutional frameworks established during the commercial revolution. Archaeological evidence from commercial centers shows continuous development of trading facilities and banking institutions that maintained medieval organizational principles while adapting to global markets. Contemporary commercial documents demonstrate systematic expansion of medieval financial innovations, international banking networks, sophisticated credit instruments, and commercial law systems that enabled global commerce. Artistic and cultural development during the Renaissance built upon medieval foundations while incorporating classical influences preserved by medieval scholars. Archaeological investigations of Renaissance workshops reveal continuity with medieval artistic traditions. Guild organization, systematic training procedures, and international artistic exchange established during the medieval period. Contemporary artistic documents demonstrate systematic development of techniques and themes that maintained medieval foundations while expanding creative possibilities through classical learning preserved by medieval scholars. Urban development during the early modern period expanded city planning principles established during the medieval commercial revolution. Archaeological evidence from European cities shows systematic expansion, utilizing medieval urban planning techniques, while adapting to increased populations and new military technologies. Contemporary urban records document institutional continuity, linking medieval municipal government with early modern civic administration, demonstrating systematic development rather than revolutionary replacement of medieval urban institutions. The transformation complete by 1500 revealed medieval Europe's fundamental achievement, creating institutional, intellectual, and technological foundations that would enable European civilization to expand globally, while maintaining essential characteristics established during the medieval period. Archaeological evidence from across Europe demonstrates not medieval civilization's death, but its metamorphosis into modernity, with medieval achievements providing foundations for unprecedented global influence. The medieval world had not ended. It had transformed itself into the foundation of our modern civilization. As we trace the last flicker of candlelight in medieval scriptoriums, as the final notes of Gregorian chant echo in cathedral walls, we see not an ending but a transformation. The medieval world had given birth to modernity, its achievements and struggles becoming the foundation upon which our own civilization stands. Archaeological excavations across Europe continue revealing this profound truth. Medieval stones still support our buildings, medieval institutions still govern our lives, medieval ideas still shape our thoughts. The university where you studied follows patterns established at Bologna and Paris 8 centuries ago. The legal system that protects your rights descends from medieval courts, where Aenarius first explained Roman law to eager students. The democratic assemblies governing modern nations evolved from medieval communes where guildmasters and merchant princes learned to govern themselves. The hospitals healing our sick developed from medieval institutions where monks and nuns first systematized medical care. Walk through any European city and medieval Europe surrounds you. Gothic cathedrals still soar toward heaven with engineering precision that challenges modern architects. Medieval bridges still carry traffic across rivers first spanned by master builders 7 centuries past. Underground, archaeological investigations reveal layer upon layer of medieval life. Pottery shards from guild workshops, coins from medieval mints, foundations of buildings that housed medieval families pursuing dreams not unlike our own. The books on your shelves preserve medieval intellectual achievements. Every university still teaches logic methods perfected by Thomas Aquinas. Every lawyer uses legal principles developed in medieval courts. Every doctor relies on systematic medical knowledge first organized in medieval universities. Every scientist follows experimental methods pioneered by Roger Bacon in his 13th century laboratory. The very alphabet you're reading was perfected by medieval scribes in monastery scriptoriums. Medieval Europe's greatest gift to the modern world was not any single achievement, but rather the demonstration that human societies can transform themselves while preserving essential values. The feudal world that emerged from Roman collapse was utterly different from classical antiquity. Yet it preserved classical learning while creating new institutions, new technologies, new forms of beauty. Medieval Europe showed that continuity and change could coexist, that tradition and innovation could strengthen each other. The eternal questions that drove medieval minds continue challenging us today. How should we balance individual freedom with social responsibility? How can we reconcile reason with faith, tradition with progress, local loyalty with universal values? Medieval philosophers, kings, and common people wrestled with these same dilemmas that shape our contemporary debates. Their struggles illuminate our own, their achievements inspire our efforts. Contemporary DNA studies reveal another profound continuity. Many Europeans today carry genetic material from medieval ancestors who built those cathedrals, copied those manuscripts, and created those institutions. Medieval Europe lives in our very cells, connecting us across centuries to people who shared our hopes, fears, and dreams. As dawn breaks over Prague's medieval towers, as morning light streams through Chartres' rose windows, as church bells call across landscapes shaped by medieval hands, we understand that the medieval world never truly ended. It transformed itself into our modern civilization while preserving its essential achievements. The cathedral bells that once called medieval Christians to prayer now mark ours in our digital age, reminding us that human aspirations transcend time itself. The medieval story continues in every breath we take, every thought we think, every dream we dare to dream.